Apologies, members. I confirm you are quorate and this meeting has been properly called.
Thank you, Paula. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Maitland.
Chairman, item number 8 are a major tenant, and I will declare an interest and leave the room.
Thanks, Chair. Item number 12 is a blood relation. I will leave the room also.
Thanks, Councillor Carruthers. Councillor Diggle.
I just say that under my training I'm able to participate but not to vote, which is the same as Councillor Groom.
Thank you. I think members should be aware that Councillor Groom is or should be a member of this committee. It's not yet recorded on the frontis of this document, but we have checked and the appropriate paperwork has been processed and Councillor Groom is entitled to be here. Councillor Wood.
Apologies for my late entry. It's item 8.
This again, whether he's coming or not. Not leaving us as soon as that.
But I will settle down as we go through the meeting. Declare an interest in item 8, please. That's because I take grass parts from one of the owners of that site.
Thanks, Councillor Wood. Apologies. Oh, Councillor Clung.
Macomb. Chair, could I seek clarification of Councillor Diggle's statement, please?
Apparently, there is a requirement for all members of the council to undergo training on planning applications subject to being a member of the committee. Councillor Diggle quite rightly has stated that he has not undergone that particular element of training. He is entitled to be here in an observer capacity and he may even be in a position to contribute, but he is not in a position to vote until that process has been completed. Thank you. The clerk will now take us through the process for the day.
I have apologies from Councillor Gilroy and Councillor Blake has intimated he doesn't intend to attend. He will be late. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or an area planning manager or other appointed officer will make a short statement addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at that time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. For those applications which are, in accordance with Council policy, subject to public speaking, then the order of eligible parties being held will be as follows. Third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and such members should withdraw from the committee chamber after making their presentation, applicants and their agents. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak in respect of any application to come forward, sit in the reserved seat and make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of committee members. When each presentation is completed, people should immediately return to their seats. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application, or if the application is a major development significantly contrary to development plan or a national development, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will then determine the application. The decision notice will be issued after a period of 48 hours has passed. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered in the period specified in Council policy. These individuals have all had their registration to speak confirmed and no other persons will be allowed to speak. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order. A copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Representations on planning applications must be made on the basis of valid planning matters only. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and to address the determining issues. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what's in the report, as members will have already read the report. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. This should allow sufficient time for interested parties to make relevant points. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long.
Everybody satisfied with that? We'll go to the minute of the meeting of 25th September 2013. Are members satisfied that's a true record? That's great, thank you. In that case, we'll go to item 4 on the agenda. Item 4 has been withdrawn. However, there is one matter to deal with, and that is that on the Planning Applications Committee frontispiece, it says the committee is in session, and within the report it says the committee is not. So if we could clarify that element of it, please, and then we'll just note that item 4 has been withdrawn.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the committee report is correct. You weren't in session, you hadn't actually heard any representations, but the application has been withdrawn as of this morning. So apologies to anybody who'd come along for that item with very short notice, but it has been formally withdrawn.
I note we have a record that Mr. William Young would wish to speak, and Mr. Andrew Scott's applicant, so it's possible Mr. William Young is here, and if that's so, you appreciate that business will not be conducted today. You're at liberty to return if you have taken the trouble to come here. Item 5, applications eligible for speaking. Dunragit Home Farm, Dunragit, planning application for construction of silage pit and slurry store.
Thank you, Chair. Right, sorry, it's all right, the slides have been taken out already. Okay. Thank you. You have a fairly comprehensive report in front of you. I've produced some slides to help you in your deliberations. I'll just run through these, just picking out the salient points which I think I ought to draw to your attention, and they'll probably be recurring throughout the debate, and you might want to raise some questions on these points. The application site on the plan, as you see in front of you, is on the north side of Home Farm Dunragit. The red rectangle and the red circle represents the silage clamp and the slurry store which are proposed. To keep to a theme and to try and make things easy, I've actually indicated by the red X and the red triangle on the plan. X marks the position of the residential caravan currently sited at the kennels, and the red triangle is the position of the kennels property. Since it is the kennels that's the property that is arguably the most affected by the proposal. Just a blow up of the site plan. Again, just showing the relationship of the development to the farm. On the immediate south side of the development, in between it and the main part of the farm complex, which is the series of sort of shapes at the bottom right-hand corner of the plan there, is Foxwood. As you see, this is a belt of mature trees which forms an L shape around the existing farm. It's currently the subject of a TPO, which is still to be confirmed, but it's effectively, but that's, it's effectively current, but just has to be registered at the land registry. So the trees themselves are protected, and that should be made note of in the consideration. The first image, this is the site of the proposal. The proposed site is actually just, it actually forms the sort of the green sort of slight dome crest just north of, just above the sort of left to right sort of line of trees and roots and things, which you can just see going across the middle of the slide there, and the sort of bit of trees on the left is the corner of Foxwood. The photograph's actually taken from the access drive to the kennels as it swings around from the Dunragit or the Home Farm settlement area into the kennels property itself. Doing a 180-degree turn from the last shot is the kennels property itself. So it just shows that there's it's simply by virtue of the difficulties in showing things. I'm just trying to demonstrate that there is a clear view from the property through to the application site. Midway between the two is the caravan, which sort of sits just off the access track to the kennels property. Just by way of illustration, the farm was the subject of an application which some of you may remember from a year or two back, where some farm buildings were given planning permission, and this involved the felling of some trees in the Foxwood area prior to the TPO being confirmed, because the TPO was actually designed around the configuration of the new buildings. But this just gives an impact. Well, the illustration of this is to show what benefits screening can show in the fullness of time. And I use those words carefully, in the fullness of time, because I realise that obviously landscaping takes a long time to develop. But that is a sort of midsummer view showing the benefits of proper and full landscaping. I'll sort of show that picture as well, because you'll see in the representative slides later on that he shows the shot or a similar shot in the autumn, when the leaves are sort of off the trees. But I'll leave it to you to weigh up the benefits. But my professional opinion is that certainly for a substantial part of the year, good landscaping by the planting of trees can provide quite significant landscape attenuation. Again, just sort of window shots through the trees, just showing that the previous buildings which were permitted and are still in the course of construction. This is from the centre of the application site, looking back towards the kennels and the caravan. Again, as you can see, that there is this potential clear view, but as you'll see in the report, the distances of these items from the development proposal are sort of reasonably distant. Looking the other way, from what would be the centre of the silage clamp, is looking southwards towards the A75 Loose Bay area. Again, it's, as you can see, it's open countryside. There's Foxwood again on the left, and you'll see there is this sort of the application site sits on this dome with a marked descent towards the south, where the slurry tank would actually be sited, sort of on the lower parts of the slope towards the centre or the central isolated tree in the picture there. Just a sort of slight variation of the previous shot, again just showing the disposition of the site compared to Foxwood. This is taken a bit further down the slope, looking again towards the kennels. This is roughly the site of the slurry tank, and as you can see, it's proposed to be on significantly lower ground to the silage clamp, and the overall design is such that actually the highest points of both structures would actually be at the same contour level. The applicant has provided some 3D model images here, and you can see the general design concept. At the foot of the plan there, or the drawing, would be Foxwood. So in effect, what you see is the site without any landscape features whatsoever. And as you can see from the 3D images, the proposal includes bunding around the silage pit area. This would be 3 metres high, and the proposal is through control with planning conditions that the bunds on the kennel side at least be planted up with trees. So there's potential for significant screening of the silage clamp area and by implication the slurry tank behind it in the longer term. Just showing a different angle, just showing how the silage clamp area is effectively cut into the dome of the top of the sort of shallow hill there, and showing the benefits and how the screen bunding actually works. X actually is marking a spot of roughly where the caravan sits. And as you can see, the summit of the slurry tank there at the back is actually depressed and is sort of level with the top of the bunding lines or the perimeter of the silage clamp area. And again, just looking at the reverse view, the idea being that, the X and the triangle again being the approximate positions of where, in that perspective, the caravan and the kennel's house actually sit. But you'll see that the open end of the silage clamp, i.e. the working face, is actually pointing away from those properties, so that when the silage is actually being nibbled away at for feeding purposes, there will always be the screening element afforded by the bunding, and also the height of the silage stored within the clamp area itself. That's probably all I need to say for the moment. There'll probably be a rack of questions which I'll be willing to take afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Barker. Members, are there any questions at this stage? Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. It was just regarding the caravan that's there. Is that a permanent fixture, or is there a time limit on it?
Thank you. We did actually check the records. As far as we could tell, it did have permission. It had a temporary permission, and to the best of my knowledge, the permission has actually expired. But it's actually reached a stage time-wise where action could be taken by the council to regularise it. But in view of the fact that its sort of disposition and everything has been considered satisfactory in the first place, action hasn't been taken and complaints haven't been received. But to the best of my knowledge, and from the records we can tell, the permission for it has actually lapsed.
Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Just in regards to, just an add-on to Councillor McKee's question there, what was its permission, its existing use? What was it for?
Sorry, it's just the use of the caravan? Yeah, it's for occupation by a worker at the kennels itself. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Carruthers. Anyone else? Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Could you confirm that there are plans to replant the tail end of Foxwood, and that would actually provide a degree of screening?
Yes, there's two elements to the potential landscaping of the proposal from the sort of from third-party dwellings. One is the fact that the tail end of Foxwood, which lies along the common boundary between the proposal and the kennel's property, that's in another ownership. That was felled some 2 to 3 years ago, and as part of the felling licence for that, our understanding is that that area of woodland has to be replanted within the next 12 months or so. So, irrespective of this proposal, that area of woodland will actually be replanted. In addition to that, what we're suggesting is to give the proposal some immediate screening impact, is to have the screen bund on the northern side of the silage clamp area, and then in addition to that, to bolster the landscaping afforded by the strip which we talked about earlier, is to have the actual bund sides planted up as well. So potentially there could actually be quite a thick planting screen there in the fullness of time.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Chair. Those things are sitting in isolation away from the farm. There is no sign of any access to get to them. Could you confirm how the access will be achieved?
Yeah, just actually, probably if I could just go back to this, go back in the slides actually, if that's possible. How do I do that? Right. Sorry. You can actually see it there actually on the plan, so on the 3D image, that you're just seeing in the black shape, which represents Foxwood at the bottom side of the picture. You'll just see that little corridor going through. That's the current access through from the farm area into this sort of site of the application area. So if you're alluding to the fact, is it necessary to drive us further access through the wood? The answer is no, because an existing access exists through the woodland area, which accesses the wider fields anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Maitland.
Councillor Nicholl's question is largely answered mine, but I was just looking at the extent of the area with respect to the canopy of Foxwood, and can I have some idea of what that distance is between the boundary of the site and the clamp?
I haven't actually scaled it off, but I can assure you that the actual side of the silage clamp actually falls clear of the canopies of the trees there. Okay.
Members happy? Can we go on to the next? Oh, Councillor Carruthers.
Sorry for coming back in again, Chair. Just on the answer there, could you just say that again, Peter? Did he say that it lies below the sight line of the dwelling in the distance? What's being constructed there? It'll lie below the sight line of the dwelling.
Yeah, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand Councillor Maitland's concern was that the construction works will be taking place under the canopies of the trees as they overhang the field. And therefore, will there be damage to the actual trees? Well, the answer is no, because the development is actually going to be standing apart from the canopy of the trees there.
Can I suggest, Peter, you maybe go back to the block plan which shows the siting in the context?
Yeah, okay. Please bear with me. Yeah. As you can see there, there's a clear distance, between the actual blue line, which is the fence line, and the trees obviously overhang the blue line towards the red line, but they don't reach as far as the red line.
If we go back one picture, does that take us back to the view from the dwelling out onto that site there? If it does, it's to get maybe it's forward on there. Is that it there? Just to get an understanding of the elevations of the construction against the visual impact that'll have on the dwellings that are there, just to try and get an understanding. I know there'll be screening and such, like just as it stands at the moment when it's open.
Yeah. So, effectively, in the long term, that view which you see will actually will revert to being a planted strip of trees, so that the view beyond the common boundary effectively won't be possible. But that would have happened anyway, irrespective of the proposal taking place, where proposed at the moment. Okay.
Everyone satisfied? No further questions? Before we go to the next stage of the process, I should say that, what remiss of me, I forgot to say that I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that recording will be subsequently made available for public listing, so that will be a matter of public record and could be accessed at some stage. We now come to representatives. We have two objectors and then a representation on behalf of the applicant. So would Mr. Peter Baker like to come forward to the microphone, please? And remember, there are 3 minutes, and I will remind you with about 30 seconds to go that you should try and come to some conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I and the majority of the people that I represent have no objection to Messrs Adams developing their business, provided that they acknowledge that their farm is now within a residential settlement, and as such, they are limited in what they can achieve without causing a statutory nuisance. The proposal to construct a silage store of industrial proportions on the skyline beggars belief, in my view. Oh, my slides are not in the right order. Sorry, can I... There's something wrong with this. Either I'm pressing the wrong button or...
Could I ask Tracy or some member of staff if they could operate the slides for the gentleman, please?
Well,
and we have very limited time, and it might be important that you do have your slides.
This is technology.
Acknowledged.
Well, I didn't have control. I sent my slides in. I had to send them in 2 separate halves to be put together, but okay.
Thank you.
Can we just go to the next slide? Okay. Mitigation, there's a slide missing which showed that where my property is and the staff caravan, which, contrary to what has been said, does have current and permanent planning permission, a fact that I verified with Cameron Houston, a planning officer, some time ago. Mitigation is proposed, including a 3-metre bund and the planting of trees. The Council's landscape architect suggests that a significant density of trees will be required to mitigate against odour and noise. Planting today will have no effect for about 30 years. The acceptance of the claim that the proposed aeration system to the slurry store will reduce odour needs, in my view as a scientist, better justification than the claims of an item of sales literature and a single sponsored study. No condition has been imposed restricting the height of the silage store. Experience is that the applicant's silage clamps are as high as 5 metres. That's it. Covered with old tyres and black plastic sheeting. An alternative site must be used. The applicants have claimed that the presence of power lines prevents the use of the brownfield site opposite the steading. Likewise, the proximity of this site to Dunragit House has been cited as a consideration. The reality is, as you see, the site, an area of dereliction, is in use for today. Next slide, please. If Messrs Adams insist that the storage must be near to the stock, then why not locate the silage store at a point closer to the agricultural sheds, the trackway that you asked to see earlier? This site is in the same field, it's below the skyline, and as such there'll be less noise nuisance. Tractors going up the hill to service the slurry, the silage clamp will be very noisy.
You have 30 seconds left.
The proposed condition on access to the proposed silage store allows unrestricted access for the purpose of feeding cattle. The collection of silage and pumping of slurry outside the specified hours will cause a nuisance. No doubt, restricting the hours to between 8 and 7 p.m. would be unacceptable to the applicant. However, if this is what is required to prevent a noise nuisance, then the store is not viable in the proposed location. I urge the committee to vote against the officer's recommendation. However, if you are unsure or divided on this, I beg you to defer a decision pending a visit to the site, and despite the applicant's history of poor compliance with conditions, consideration of imposing tighter conditions, such as restricting the height of the store and limiting access to 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you very much,
Thank you very
Chair.
much. Oh, sorry, of course. Are there any questions for this objector from members? The return to your seat, please. We can have the second objector, which is Mr. M. Wells.
Mr. Chair, first of all, I would like to point out the inaccuracies of your report to start, or some points in your report. The first one is that the gentleman farmer has improved grassland on undulating terrain supporting a herd of beef cattle. That, to my information, is not true, because the gentleman farmer has been selling his stock, and my information that he is going into milk production, and he will have 400 cattle captive within that farm area. The second one is that the unbundled silage store, both and the slurry pit, both of which have ceased to exist. That is not true, because the unbundled silage store within the farm complex is in use and full to capacity. That silage store, if it was to be kept within the complex, just needs bunding up, rather than building a new one on greenfield site. So those are two glaring points that are totally inaccurate. The point with the new slurry tank, I don't object to the farmer having a new slurry tank. But my information is that the odour and disruption to everybody round about the area will be greatly increased by that slurry tank, particularly if it has an over-the-top, a gooseneck filling point. Now, the problem is with this is that if the farm was still in beef, the cattle would be out on the fields for 6 months of the year. With it going to milk, they will be confined within the farm complex 12 months of the year. That is the plan, as I understand it. The slurry tank, I understand, is going to be one of the largest of the types available, holding, I'm told, around about 1.5 million gallons of slurry. Now, my figures are for the containment of that tank. Now, the essence of the tank is to keep slurry in there for approximately 6 months.
You have 30 seconds left, sir.
The tank will produce over a 12-month period 5,920,000 gallons of slurry in the year, so that tank will be emptied constantly. Will not be able to hold the amount of slurry that it is intended to hold. The nuisance and the smell and the odour from that tank will be enormous. It will be in constant use.
That's your time, thank you. Members have any questions for this gentleman? Kind enough to return to your seat, please. We now have Mr. Boyd McIntosh appearing on behalf of the applicant. You have 3 minutes as well, Mr. McIntosh.
The matters raised to the committee that are material to any decision to be taken today have already been addressed in the official report before you, and many which have been fully discussed with your planners during the process of the application. The statutory consultees have expressed their opinion in respect of the proposed and have not formally objected to the intended development. The matters that they have raised have been appropriately dealt with by way of suggested conditions, and my client has no objection to the terms of the conditions as detailed. The original plans had been to store the slurry approximately 1,000 metres away from the steering and other properties. At that time it would have been pumped by pipeline below ground. This method, which would have suited the farm and most of the residents, became unachievable. This has resulted in delays, and time constraints now mean that the project has to be completed by the end of the year to secure the funding. A site visit has taken place on a previous occasion, and should it be necessary for this application, it would put the project out with the completion date required. It was commented on the size of the pits. The new pits take into account where the existing pits have been and haven't been big enough, and they look like they need to be replaced. And this was part of the farm plan, and with SEPA cooperation and help, the new pits have been designed. Drainage problems would prevent the pits being shifted to another location. The location that has been chosen is to suit basically SEPA requirements on drainage and distance from watercourses. The volumes spoken about there with the slurry are inaccurate in the fact that a full farm waste plan had to be implemented before any grant approval was received. Paragraph 4.10.11 highlight the potential improvements that the proposed installations will bring to the locality, particularly those existing properties around the application site. The new slurry handler arrangements are a significant improvement on the facilities that serve the established farming operations, and they have been positioned within the landscape to mitigate the visual impact. Whilst it is accepted these may still have an impact on the adjoining parties, it is submitted that they are appreciably less than the existing arrangements and will further mitigate the impact of the operational farming unit and adjoining residential properties. Indeed, in paragraph 4.11, the Environmental Health Officer acknowledges that the proposed system represents current best practice and would minimise the likelihood of nuisance complaints. It can therefore be appreciated through the commentary within the official report and the replies from the statutory consultees that the development is in complete compliance within the terms of your statutory development plan. It also requires to be acknowledged, despite the comments submitted in the representations, that there are a range of direct material benefits to be had to many of the parties submitting objections from the implementation of the scheme in terms of amenity and landscape benefits that can be derived from this proposal. It is therefore respectfully requested that despite further comments made today, that the committee agrees with considered assessment of your officials in respect of the details of this development and approve the application as per the recommendation and considered conditions stated.
Thank you for that. Do any members have any questions for this gentleman? Mr. Councillor Carruthers?
I suppose, Chairman, the only question that I've got written down, he didn't really answer, was the odour control. How will you control the smells?
Pardon?
How will you control the smells from the actual slurry tank itself? When you look on the photo slides and that, it looks like it'll be open topped. Will there be any control over the odours and such like?
The system that will be used to agitate it will reduce the smells that it is constantly being agitated. You get the smells, the worst smells come when you store it, forms a crust, the gas builds up and then you agitate it. This system will have a system of air bubbles percolating through it all the time, so that there never will be a build-up of odour.
Can you advise me whether this site is within an outright vulnerable zone? And also, Mr. Wells raised the point about slurry being spread every day. Now, we know that's not fact, but could you give us an indication of what restrictions on slurry spreading there would be?
With the waste management plan put forward, you need to have at least 6 months storage for slurry. So, where these figures come from, we don't know. It's a very large slurry ring that's going up, but it's less than actually what he has stated, the size of it. And that has been designed and calculated to take for 6 months storage.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Any other questions? Councillor McComb?
Thank you, Chair. Could you comment, Mr McIntosh, on the allegation that these facilities are intended to serve as a dairy farm?
I have no knowledge of any dairy farm going to be, what do you call it, no diversification to dairy as I know of. As far as I'm concerned, it's a beef farm. Everything we've done and implemented has been for beef cattle slurry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McComb. Councillor Wood?
Very point I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Members happy? Okay. Can you return to your seat, please? Members are now in session. Councillor Bribra?
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, I've listened to the objectors and the applicant agent. Whether it's a beef or a milk farm is irrelevant under planning terms anyway. Although I would imagine that there'll be some environmental issues if there are, a bigger. So I've read the report and I don't have any problems with it, and I think we should go with the recommendations on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Driver. Is that a proposal? Okay. Councillor Geddes.
Well, sir, I would have no hesitation whatsoever in seconding Councillor Dryborough's motion. As far as I'm concerned, you know, paragraph 4.15 of the report sums it up, encapsulates it, and if you read that in conjunction with the proposed conditions, it would seem to me, in fact, that the application should be granted for the reasons stated in the report. So I will second Councillor Dryborough. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Geddes. Does any member have an alternative view? Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks. It's not about an alternative view, but the one thing that was brought up, which nobody's touched on, I wonder if we just get advice on that. Statutory nuisance was mentioned earlier. Does it comply? I mean, they're saying that there's residential there and there's a farm there and there's statutory nuisance. I'd just like clarification on that, please, before we go forward.
Mr. City.
Statutory nuisance is something that falls out with the Planning Act. It's a freestanding issue. So basically, in the event that there was proven to be a statutory nuisance, environmental health officers have the powers to actually deal with that under their regulations. We've obviously taken on board their comments in coming to this recommendation, and there's nothing to indicate that it would be an obvious statutory nuisance, provided it complies with the terms of the planning conditions. And in the event that it was to become that, then environmental health officers have powers under their legislation to deal with it.
That satisfy your inquiry, Councillor Carruthers? Okay. Any other member otherwise minded? In that case, the application approved. Clerk, please.
Committee is determined to approve the application subject to conditions as set out in the report.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Barker. Turn to item 6 on the agenda. Alterations and extensions to hotel at Port Logan Inn, Port Logan. Case Officer Billy Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for alterations and extension to a hotel at Port Logan, formerly the Port Logan Inn, now known as the Port Logan Bay Hotel. Just brief summary of the background to try and pull it together for members before I show the slides. Very briefly, there is an existing planning permission in place for alterations and extension to the hotel, which was granted in November 2011. As built thus far, the development varies materially from the approved plans and details under that 2011 permission. The current application is therefore seeking to gain approval for elements of the development as already built, and therefore retrospectively, and it also introduces quite significant changes to the design itself. So in other words, it's not just regularisation of the as-built variations from the 2011 approval, it is regularisation of the as-built elements plus other design changes which significantly change the development itself. One brief point of clarification also on representations. There were a number of late representations. These were all in support, but having been received out with the statutory period, they're not specifically referred to in the report, although you will see there's reference to them in paragraph 421, which states that there were some letters of support, but all of them were late. Notwithstanding, however, the points made in these letters of support essentially were the business case, the strong desire in the community to have the development completed and the property brought back into beneficial use, and the benefit of having a public house or a facility, a hotel facility, to the community itself. So clearly, whilst they were late representations, those were considerations in the assessment of the proposal, and can I say at this stage that the Planning Authority very much agrees with that desire to have the development completed. So I'll take you through the slides now and give you a flavour of the development. This is an image of the front elevation as it is today. There would be a projecting extension to the front. The pillars, the sandstone pillars you see there would be the front elevation of the new extension, which I think is a tea room or restroom. That's an angled view showing the front extension, the main entrance door in the foreground, which enters into an extension on the gable facing you.
This is a view from the southwest looking back up the street. That's the extension as built at the moment. As approved under the 2011 approval, that should extend by 5 metres or so. As built, it extends by an additional metre or slightly over a metre, so it's about 6 metres projection now, whereas 5 metres was approved. That's just a more distant view from the southwest looking up the street towards the development. A similar view from the other side showing the access road to the rear service yard and the side extension. The side extension has also been increased in size from that approved under the 2011 approval. Just a closer view of the access to the rear at the northeastern gable, again showing the new extension to that gable. On the left is the converted former mill building, which is now in residential use in separate ownership. This is a view of the rear elevation of the property from the back of the site. Clearly that's as built at this stage. As proposed, virtually the whole of that backyard would be filled with an extension, more or less right back to the point where I'm standing to take these pictures. That's simply a view over the rear of the site looking southwest. Again, you'll note the as-built element of the proposal. That would be a 2.5-storey extension out there and projecting much further, almost to the rear of the site, much further than that part that's already built. That's a view back from, I'm standing with my back against the rear elevation of the existing hotel looking out towards the back of the site. The rear boundary of the site would be where you can just see some winds there. There's obviously a change in level and there's an embankment there. This is a general view of the street scene in Port Logan, looking northeast. You note the unique characteristics of Port Logan, whereby the sea defence is at a higher level and the roads on top, the public roads on top of that sea defence. The houses actually sit lower than the road and are accessed by the small private lane you see fronting the houses. Again, that's a slightly zoomed in view from the same viewpoint looking northeast towards the hotel. That's a general view of this street scene looking southwest. That's me standing across the road from the hotel looking down the street. That's a view from the car park area, which is diagonally opposite the hotel. And that's just a general view of the street scene again from the car park, trying to show the whole of Port Logan. I've got a couple of more detailed views of the front elevation, highlighting the use of the columns and the additional extension, the additional projection of the front extension. The columns were not approved under the 2011 approval, but these have been reintroduced without approval. Again, this is a view of the front door showing a bit more detail. I would comment at this stage that the cast iron structure you see there fronting the hotel was neither approved in 2011 nor is it shown on the current plans for this application. That's a view of the tea room interior, again just showing the front projection. As I say, it's 6 metres or thereby, whereas as approved it was 5 metres. That's a view of the side extension, which again has been increased in size as compared to the 2011 approval. A view of the side extension from the rear looking forward. This is a view of the Port Logan Inn as previously existing in 2011. The inn itself includes the 2-storey element and it also incorporates the single-storey part of the first single-storey part of the terrace that's painted kind of cream-coloured. So that is actually part of the hotel. And that's an overview of Port Logan Village taken in 2011. I've tried to reproduce the plans, but I'm afraid they're just not clear at all in these views. The main point I was trying to that we need to note in the plans is that that's a better one actually. It shows the extensive rear extension towards the top in that view. Obviously, there's a roof plan there that shows the circular turret, points to note there was the reintroduction of dormer windows, wall-head dormer windows, and the change in the orientation of the rear extension. As approved in 2011, it was considered that the rear extension had been quite carefully considered and detailed to relieve its mass and size. There were no dormers, there were roof windows only. The extension was actually set at an angle to the main building, which in our view at that stage clearly fitted into the site better and helped to mitigate the overall impact of what is quite clearly a large extension even under the 2011 proposal. That's an image of the plans for the proposed front elevation. Side and rear elevations. This is the proposed block plan. The coloured area shows the extensions, the shaded area shows the extensions. You'll note the extension as now proposed virtually fills the whole of the site. There's little or no even circulation space around, particularly to the rear. That's the as approved 2011 ground floor plan. That does show up quite clearly. You'll see that the rear extension was angled and as I say, in our view, fitted better into the site. It was a bit smaller, it was a bit lower, it did not have dormers, it had roof lights only, and the angling of it mitigated against its overall impact. The block plan in that view, unfortunately, is smaller than the previous one, so you can't quite make the comparison, although perhaps in the later ones it might show up better. This is again the approved front elevations. Side and rear. I've tried to compare the two here as approved. This is lower ground floor plans. On the left is the approved one where the extension is angled, the rear extension is angled, and on the right is as proposed where it's larger and it's directly out from the rear of the property. First and second floor plans, again highlighting the same kind of points, although unfortunately in the approved one, in that view, it doesn't show up so clearly, but the comparison was really to be made there in terms of the roof windows instead of dormers, and the change essentially in the floor plan. Again, elevations as approved on the left and proposed on the right. And that was the two block plans approved on the left and proposed on the right. I think you can see from that view that as approved, the extension was to some extent slightly smaller. It didn't quite take up as much space in the site as the now proposed rear extension. Following are slides that have been provided by a representative, so that ends my presentation. So, to sum up, the key issues here are design, scale, massing, and the potential impact on the amenity, on residential amenity of the area. The matter of principle is not for consideration here because there's already an existing planning permission. So what is being considered is the design changes in terms of this proposal for alterations and extension to the hotel. The recommendation is to refuse for the reasons stated.
Thank you for that, Billy. I have Councillor Dick with a question.
Mr. Murray, could I just ask you to comment on the car parking arrangements?
Yes. As proposed under the 2011 application, there was an area of car parking shown in the land on the other side of the road where I was standing when I took some of the views. That area showed, I think it was 21 car parking spaces, that land at that time, that's the car parking area there, that land at that time was leased by the applicant from Logan Estates. Therefore, at the 2011 stage, the roads officer assessed the proposal on the assumption that that car parking was available. So therefore, roads advice in 2011 was on that basis. Since that time, it is understood that Logan Estates have terminated the applicant's lease of that area of land. So there is now a question mark over availability of parking there, both whether it would be dedicated parking for the hotel and car parking per se. I mean, historically there has always been a car park in that part of Port Logan. It's not a key consideration in terms of this proposal because I said a moment ago this application is the key issues here are design, etc. So the car parking was not a key issue here. However, as you'll note from the concluding two paragraphs of my report, to cover the possibility that members might take a different view to officer's recommendation and wish to recommend approval of this application, I think it would then be beholden on us to confirm the position with Logan Estates first of all and the applicant as to the availability of that car parking. And if it was found that it was not available, then we would have to seek further advice from the roads officer as to whether or not the development was acceptable without the 21 car parking spaces that were shown at the time of the 2011 approval. Similar circumstances apply in terms of foul drainage arrangements because the final paragraph of the report covers this. Foul drainage, a septic tank was proposed in this area of land. Again, therefore, if Logan Estates are not prepared to lease this land or permit a septic tank to be installed in their land, that issue would have to be readdressed in terms of how it was proposed to deal with foul drainage from the extended hotel.
Thanks for that. Any other members have any questions of the planning officer? In that case, thank you for the moment. We now have two objectors and then the applicant on behalf of the agent, it says here. However, the first objector is Fiona Mackay, please. You will have 3 minutes to complete your presentation.
Thank you. Could I have the first slide, please? The first slide shows pre-development. At the junction, you can see there's no obstructions from cars coming down from the Drumore side or into the village. You can also see that it's a traditional characteristics of a small Scottish fishing village. Next slide, make it quick. On this one, you can see that the cars have previously parked there with yet again, no obstructions to the turnings and the markings at the entrances. Next one. But now that's my daughter going. I've taken her down to school. I've been going down to wait at the bus stop across from the building, and on numerous occasions there is 4x4. Other people are parking where that car is parked. And the cars coming down from the Drumore Road at the side of the inn are having to come over to the other side of the road. There's no pavement at either side to get you to the bus stop safely. Where am I up to? Next one. And as you can see again, the cars are parking, taking up one side right up to the middle of the white line. And regularly there's only like 1 or 2 cars parked out there, and most of the time they're within the 10 metres of that junction, which I believe is not supposed to happen, go by the highway code. Next one. The giveaway markings, now you have to drive out onto the road to see to your left. So first of all, you check your right, go out and check your left. There's the vehicles are still parking there, and that's without the pub being open. It's restricting the access, well, sorry, the view of both pedestrians crossing that area and the motorists driving in and out. I myself have witnessed a car coming down from this junction and pulling out in front of a car leaving the village, even when it was actually turning to the right. And again, another occasion it was turning into the village, but it pulled out in front of a car.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Next one. Oh, that was it. Basically, I am concerned with the front having 3 entrances as well into the building. It's people crossing at different points, cars parked already, as you see, and with the question mark being with the car parking facilities, and it's basically restricting your view. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you just be kind enough to wait until anyone, there might be a question or two for you. Any members have any questions for you? No. In that case, return to your seat, please. Thank you.
Thanks.
Second objector is Gregory Mackay, please. You have the same 3 minutes, Mr. Mackay. Thank you.
I understand the reasoning for developing the inn to an extent, and the plans to have a tea room, as we once had a tea room in the village, and it was very popular with both visitors and locals. Although, in my personal opinion, and I'm sure many others, the Romanesque style pillars are a complete eyesore, going out with the atmosphere and charm of such a beautiful, homely fishing village. People who come to visit are not expecting to be welcomed by the sight of these huge pillars, which take away some of the personality of the area. Instead, most expect, and some prefer, a simple country inn, which feels more homely and cosy instead of a fancy hotel kind of thing. The size of the overall plans, including what has already been done, are a bit too much, as there is just not enough space on the corner with the dangers that already occur due to limited visibility. The 3 entry points into the building, which are in the plans, seem a bit dangerous due to the fact that they all lead out right into the main road, and especially with the limited visibility that will happen. I've also seen that there are plans to have Juliet-style balconies and turrets, which again are out with the simplicity of the village. They don't really go together themselves. You've got the pillars, the balconies and turrets, a mix of styles thrown in, which in this particular situation, I believed less is more. That's it, really.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Do any members have any questions for this gentleman? No, in that case, if you kind enough to turn to your seat, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now have Mr. A. Kyle and Mr. Ian McFadden. I believe it's a joint presentation, but if you're doing it together, it's still just limited to 3 minutes. Thank you. There you go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Kyle, the owner of the Port Logan Bay Hotel. I'm here today to address any questions put to me. And I'd like to apologise for Mr. Beale. He was rushed into hospital on Saturday, so I've had to stand in at short notice with the help of Mr. McFadden, the architect. Mainly it's regarding planning issues that I have to speak about. We do have planning permission for in 2011 that Mr Murray's mentioned. The main issues are that the 3 feet that have come out further than I should have done. The reason I've come out that far is because the logistics of the whole tea room, if I didn't get my row of tables in for that meeting, I would have lost 10 tables. And then that would have made the job not viable to build because it's 3-storey. And plus the fact I would have lost 2 waitresses as well because it's 5 tables per waitress, it's 10 tables in total. The photograph shows to the broken light line on the existing old car park in front of the pub that it's a broken white line, and they talk about doorways into the place. I am going to create a 1.6 footpath in front of the pillars to create a public footpath that was never there before, as the council hasn't adopted the footpath that was there many years ago as across the road. I asked for help with Mr Murray and Robert Duncan around about a year ago for minor amendments on the application.
You have 30 seconds left, sir.
And the application came out and they looked at it and they advised me to put a new application in completely. And that's what I've done. Now, I've got Mr McFadden here, the architect, that would answer any questions that anybody has to ask.
Thank you, Mr Kyle. Thank you for your presentation. I think maybe at this juncture we could ask questions of either Mr Kyle or Mr McFadden. Do members have any questions for either gentleman here before us today? Councillor Carruthers?
Actually, I'll just touch on the 1.6 metre footpath because we hadn't heard that one before. And I suppose on your interpretation of a non-material variation, maybe it's for your architect in particular. When you see the slides, we've seen the slides earlier, it looked like there wasn't any room for a footpath. But maybe that's been proposed, it's through the roads, maybe that has been agreed. I haven't seen that. And I take it, I assume that you're talking about a non-material variation when you're talking about slight amendments. But is that as proposed? We've seen the 2 different proposals. We've seen as is, and we've seen what's been proposed. I've never seen a non-material variation being just as small as that. So if you could just clarify that point, please.
Yeah, for sure. The proposal for the footpath is included within the current application, so it won't be non-material. There is physical dimensions from the building as proposed, as built, to the edge of the carriageway of 1.6. Mr Kyle hopes to introduce a footway along there, which is a continuation of a footway beyond the inn itself, which is immediately adjacent to the 2 adjacent dwelling houses. So it's part of the proposal to provide safe pedestrian access in front of the building.
I can take that on board. And just as far as it was intimated earlier that there's been extensions beyond what was agreed. And he was talking about a metre, I think, or 3 foot he was talking about earlier in regards to getting table sizes and that. There was an extension, it's maybe the same part, there's an extension at the side that's different. In the pictures we've seen where it hasn't been complied with the actual plan permission that was granted. Could you go into any more detail why that was? Why you haven't complied with the actual permission that was granted at the time?
Yeah, I think in terms of the building as it grew, it was as part of the design process, and then subsequently on site, the client decided that, or Mr Kell decided that additional service areas were required. I've actually, since Mr Beale is unable to attend, I had done a personal exercise which was to overlay the previous approval with that currently proposed. And yes, they do vary in terms of form on the ground, and the illustration that I have created for myself is that the area towards the front of the road and the extension of the side has slightly increased, not in its full width, but towards the entrance itself. So there's an area, difficult to say, I haven't dimensioned it, in comparison on the ground floor, which is the entrance. Previously there was a footprint of 388 square metres, and now we're having a footprint of 465. 16.5 of that is actually the extension to the tea room, which is no bigger than, let's say, a domestic garage. There has been some variations to the footprint per se.
Councillor Carruthers, happy? Thank you. Councillor Maitland?
Looking at the front elevations, it does seem to me that the extension that has been added does actually make the front elevations, which I think actually already are pretty large, look even bigger with respect to the side. What's your opinion of that?
Yeah, again, not knowing what Mr Murray was going to present in the day, I did a comparison for myself, which I can actually pass out. The visuals are slightly better than the scanned documents that Mr Murray had. Professionally, I don't think the massing scale, and I'll leave out design because the design has changed extensively, that it would warrant a full application to regularise it. More so the front elevation. When you see them in comparison together, again, in my professional opinion, I don't think there is a great deal of variation, apart from the design, on general massing of the building and the scale of the building.
Councillor Maitland.
May I come back? Thank you very much. And I wonder if you could possibly help us to understand why it was that you chose that particular design in the front, because Mr Mackay has raised the issue of the inappropriateness of a classical pillar along the front. I wonder if you could possibly explain how that's happened.
Yeah, the initial proposals back in 2011 introduced a different scale of an extension. The previous case officer, Mr Barker, went through a design process with regard to that, discussed the columns. They were in a different format at the time, and they extended 2 stories at that. It was discussed at that particular time that that was inappropriate. The introduction of the columns is a substitution to the mullions that were previously approved, and it was client's, or Mr Cowell's, decision to provide a little bit more detail, a little bit more interest to the elevation. In its context, these columns would actually be part of that ground floor elevation. There'd be plaster butts either side, windows between, and there'd be a cornice work over the top. So they'd all complement each other. Yes, they're not true terms vernacular, but there's a lot of different pieces of architecture in Port Logan. There's no precedence with regard to that from the original fishing village itself. So mainly in a detail thing, give a bit of interest.
Councillor Maitland, happy? Any other member? Councillor Driver, then Councillor Wood.
Mr Murray already mentioned about the supporters of this application with regard to employment and things like that, and he said quite clearly that he can't disagree with those particular things, but it isn't a sort of planning issue, and I'm concerned that you as an architect understand the planning side of things. However, you have not stuck, or I would imagine you've had few discussions with Mr Murray and Mr Duncan over the past few months with regards to the extension you've done to this. I'm just wondering how that relationship's actually worked over the past year.
Yeah, we had arranged several meetings with Mr Duncan and Mr Murray. Just essentially when the development was found to be not in comparison with the original planning approval. And yes, perhaps Mr. Kyle could pop in and sort of expand a little bit, but we felt there was not very much of a compromise with regard to the extra 1 metre or 1.1 metres. It was explained to them, the justification of the rows of tables, the service corridors, the workability of the tea room itself. And unfortunately, it wasn't adopted by the planning authority in terms of in principle, commercial decision.
Councillor, I'd be happy. Councillor Wood.
It was really just to seek clarification. The applicant made suggestion that his business plan and the sustainability of the venture required the extra tables. That would suggest to me that that requires extra patronage to go into your hotel. I presume that it wouldn't be supported completely by locals and would therefore require further vehicles. Once again, has that part of the extension been put to our roads department to evaluate whether if there is a capacity? Because we've heard recently that the car park may no longer be available.
I would presume even if it hasn't, we could add a condition if everyone were minded to support an application that such a requirement would be achieved before that permission were granted. But I don't think we're at that stage yet. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Combe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm intrigued by the insertion of the circular turret into the plan. Can you give us some information about the background leading to that particular element becoming part of the plan?
Yeah. When we looked at the reconfiguration of the bedroom accommodation to the rear, taking into account a slightly different approach to how the extension grew from the back of the existing inn. Previously, it had a cant to it, if you like. This time it's at 90 degrees. So it's purely a circulation issue in terms of how it turns the original building corner. I introduced a curve architecturally to ease the flow, if you like, to the accommodation to the back, which would be of a good quality standard. And on the basis of that, instead of putting a lead roof on it, there was a small turret introduced. It has, in my opinion, little impact to the elevation, if anything, just creates a little bit more interest. And on some local housing, probably state housing, you do get that little piece of vernacular where there is a circular staircase serving the house as it passes through the floors, and it can be cut with a circular element, if you like.
Thank you.
Okay.
Happy with that, Councillor McComb. Any other member? Any further questions? Councillor Carruthers?
Thanks for letting me back into your chair. Just a small one, hasn't been covered, I don't think. Not fully. Termination of the lease of the car park. What impact will that have on future business?
Car parking.
Yeah, car park. I have an email here from Galbraith, the people that leased the car park to me, that came this morning and assures that my lease is going to be renewed as soon as the planning issues are sorted. That's what this email says.
Thanks, Councillor. Although we've not cited that email, I presume these are all conditions that we would impose if we were minded to make such an approval. Are there any other questions for the applicant agent? In that case, we'd be kind enough to return to your seats, please. Members are now in session. Councillor Dick.
Chair, could I premise my remarks by agreeing very much with the planning officer that I think all of us who know that particular hotel, it was in its heyday, it was a hub that attracted many people not just from the village but far and wide, and would I think all of us would be desirous to see something of it. One of the things that strikes me is I don't think you can really get an appreciation from the slides, good as they've been. I don't often like to do this, but I think this is one of these ones where if members were minded, we might consider a site visit. I really do think it would help in the consideration of this particular application. I would ask members to consider that.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dick. We've now got Councillor Maitland, McKee and McCaughey in that order, please.
I don't know if Councillor Dick's got a seconder. I don't know if you want to find that out first.
I think it's worthy of debate. You made an observation yourself, Councillor Maitland, that suggests that a site visit might be appropriate, but we might as well discuss the matter fully before we get to that stage. But if that was your inquiry, if you're seconding Councillor Dick, that's absolutely fine. Have Councillor McCaughey wanting to come in. Councillor McCaughey.
Yeah, I'm happy to second Councillor Dick, because the whole argument here by both the applicant and the objectors has been to do with the massing and the impact on the local area. And I think, we've argued this before, that a lot of the slides, and particularly the plans, so it was incumbent upon the rear of the building, taking up the whole of that ground at the back. Now, certainly you couldn't get an image of that because we couldn't actually see the plans, even though they were up there. They were so faint. And it's not an area of the region that I know, and I wouldn't be happy and wouldn't feel safe making a decision today, because I just don't know the lie of the land down there at all. So I'm more than happy to go on a site visit, because that would answer the whole nub of the issue here about the massing within that geographical area. So I'm happy to second Councillor Dick.
Okay, Mr. Sucky, do you have anything to add to this?
I was just going to say, Chair, that it's my understanding of procedures that if you've got a motion for a visit, that sort of trumps everything else, if you like, so you then have to decide if you're going for a visit before continue with any debate on the matter.
Thank you for that advice. Are members minded to have a site visit to appraise ourselves more fully and in more detail of this particular application site? Councillor Maitland and then Councillor Thompson.
Chairman, no, I'm not. I think we've got enough information here to decide the matter today, so I propose that we don't go on a site visit.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Thompson. However, I'll still let Councillor Ted Thompson come in. He did ask in advance to speak. Councillor Thompson. Ted.
Okay, I think we've got enough information here. We have enough detail to decide the matter today, and I don't believe that we actually need a site visit. So I'd second Councillor Maitland's amendment.
That's fine, Councillor Ted Thompson. I think we've already agreed that Councillor Stephen Thompson had in fact indicated he would support that before you were invited to speak. My apologies if you were looking to speak before him. We now have a situation where Councillor Dick has proposed a site visit. Councillor McCaughey has seconded that and explained why that should be the case. Councillor Maitland says that she has enough information to make a determination, and Councillor Stephen Thompson has seconded that. So can we go to the vote, please? Stephen, yes.
Okay. Motion is to delay consideration to allow a site visit. The amendment is that to proceed to determine the application today. Chair.
Motion. Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Dick.
Motion.
Councillor Blake. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCaughey. Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie is present. Councillor Stephen Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Ted Thompson.
Amendment.
Chairman.
Councillor Wood. I knew that wasn't adding up. Did I miss out you, Councillor Gedley? I got you down as voting for the motion.
It's,
Yeah.
Chairman.
Councillor Wood.
Ms. Purcell.
Motion.
I apologise. I have obviously got this completely out of order. Councillor Carruthers.
No, it's fine. Maybe the confusion comes from my fellow group members not being able to vote, but amendment.
Amendment. And Councillor Wood.
I'd already put down for the motion, but if you wish, I can put it again.
No, sorry, I didn't hear you. Right. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 7. David, 7 and 7. Yes, okay, that was 7 votes for the motion, 7 votes for the amendment. Would the chair like to exercise his casting vote?
In that case, I will vote for the motion. We'll have a site visit.
Okay. The committee is determined to... I've forgotten the word. Defer consideration of this application pending a site visit.
Councillor Geddes.
Can I ask for some clarification from a process point of view, Chairman, because, sorry? The thrust of my question would be, as Mr Murray has already alluded to, paragraphs 4.23 and 4.24. There's issues there which could, and I stress could, possibly require clarification depending on the decision which is taken after the site visit and when we reconvene. Would it be permissible in the interests of expediency, sir, to get that relevant information now, rather than us going, fixing up a site visit, coming back here, debating, and then depending on the decision, and I stress, Chairman, depending on the decision which might be taken, having to go and get further information. In the interests of expediency, what I'm really asking, sir, is would it be permissible to fill in the time gainfully by endeavouring to get that information so that were we to need it, and I stress again, were we to need it, that when we reconvene, it would already be to hand. That's the thrust of my question, Chairman.
I think that would be a very appropriate and reasonable approach to take, and I think as well we should have detailed plans that are very explicit, available at some stage, whether it be on the day or at the next meeting, so that we can examine in detail should we require to do that as well. I'd be happy to have that done. Clark, can you clarify the situation, please?
Just note the committee has asked the planning officer to deal with the issues set out in 4.23 and 4.24 of his report ahead of the next meeting of this committee.
Thank you, Mr Murray. In that case, that concludes business section 6. Item 7 is continued siting of 3 porta cabins and admin office, sports changing rooms and equipment storage at Heston Rovers Football Club, Maryfield, Dumfries. Case Officer Jessica Taylor. When you're ready, Jessica.
This application relates to the operations of Heston Rovers Football Club, which is based at Maryfield, Dumfries. The application seeks permission to retain the existing temporary units on the site for a further 3 years to allow time for the club to develop a permanent clubhouse. Running through the brief history of the site, in 2007, permission for the siting of porta cabins was refused on the basis of the nature and design of the proposal being inappropriate to a residential setting. However, a second application in 2007 was approved by the committee on the basis that the units would be externally clad and have a pitch roof added. In 2008, permission was granted again, but with the conditions that were previously imposed removed, and further 2 storage units were also approved. In this current application, the applicants have provided a supporting statement to explain the reasons for the delay in developing a permanent structure at the site and the timescales of what they're trying to achieve in the next 3 years. The main points are summarised in paragraph 4.5 of the report. Just running through the just running through the photographs. The first photograph is a view looking up Westfield Road towards the application site. This photograph shows the units, which is with the hedge referred to in condition 3 at the front of the site. And this photograph is taken looking back with the playing fields on the right-hand side of the photograph and the units in front of you. In assessing the statement produced by the applicants, it is considered reasonable justification to allow the siting of the units for a further 3 years in order for a permanent structure to be progressed. So the application is recommended for approval for extending for a further 3 years.
Thank you for that, Jessica. Do any members have any questions for the planning officer? Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. There's a statement here that the access for vehicles is from Westfield Road. Now, in my experience, the principal access now is off Kelwood Road. And most of the vehicles I've seen there go in via Kelwood Road.
Yeah, there is an access still off Westfield Road, but they have created a new access off Kelwood Road, which they can use, but the access on Westfield Road is still open.
Okay. Any other? Councillor Geddes.
It's in relation to proposed condition 4, Chairman, and it makes reference, it's on page 57, sir. It makes reference to a planting scheme to enhance the hedge in the southwestern boundary shall be submitted. Can we go back to the slide, please, and make sure that we've got the southwestern boundary? That's the one, yeah. So that is the southwestern boundary. And yeah, I think, well, I certainly would agree that if we agree to grant the application, that would certainly need, the appropriate degree of enhancement. But I merely wanted clarification at this stage, sir. I'm grateful to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Geddes. Councillor Dick.
Yeah, just on that point, if my understanding is correct, this is just a continuation of what exists at the moment, a pending more permanent structure. That being the case, why would we want to plant a hedge if the whole site is going to change at some point in the future?
I think probably it is reasonable to have a condition about the planting was on the 2008 approval, and you can see they have done some, but it's quite sporadic. So given it is proposed for 3 years, we consider it's reasonable that we can get some planting established in there. And again, it may be that when a future application comes in, then they've got the established hedge in there.
Thanks for that. Any other member? In that case, we'll now go to the next stage of the process. We have 2 representations, an objector, and then Mr. Lawrence Wilson, who's the agent, and Mr. Watson. So, firstly, Mr. David Martin, the objector, and you have 3 minutes, Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chairman and Councillors, I speak as a resident of Westfield Road. Interesting to hear the points about the access being via Westfield Road when there is a new road in place. This is principally part of our objection to this. Despite the council granting planning for a road to temporary buildings which had in actual fact exceeded their planning permission, the road is still being used as access to Westfield Road. We have no objection to what Hessian Rovers do. Most of us agree that they do a really good job for the local area. The community benefits from the sporting side of it, but we cannot let our hearts in this matter rule our heads. Scottish Government policy states that it's not best practice to continually renew temporary permissions without appropriate justification and reason. The justification which has been given for this is a business plan. I've got a copy of the business plan here, which is in the shape of an email from Keith Nichol, who is Club Development Officer for Hessian Rovers, to Jessica Taylor. I think this business plan can best be summed up as what's possibilities, ifs, maybes, we might, we could. This is not a business plan. I write business plans as my living. This business plan is purely pie in the sky. The business plan appears to be on the basis of the fact that if we give another 3 years temporary permission to these ugly eyesores of porta cabins, what will happen then is somehow £325,000 will be raised to build a porta cabin. This will come from the council, who are obviously, as we know, all flush with money. will come from various grants from different places. Now, my understanding of the grant structure is that there has to be some form of fundraising put in place by the club. I've looked on their website, I've read in their business plan. There is no plan for raising funds. There's no fundraising currently being taken. There's no strategy for achieving these plans. There's no monthly and annual targets for achieving these plans. There's no figure for how much has been raised so far, and there are most certainly no guarantees. Our fear as residents of Westfield Road is that what's going to happen here is that the 3 years are going to come. It's going to be time for these porta cabins to come down again, and once again we're going to let our hearts rule our heads, because we all like to see the kids playing football, and I'm one of them. I'm a big football fan. We love to see the kids playing football, but at the end of the day the law has got to be applied, whether that's somebody painting a restaurant a daft colour in the middle of the town, or somebody siting temporary porta cabins on an almost permanent basis. We've seen what happened in the previous application with this caravan that may or may not be permanently sited.
You've got 30 seconds left.
That's fine. Another point I'd like to raise is obviously about road safety, and I know this is not something that can necessarily be considered particularly, but when a member of the club says to my children who are out riding their bicycles on the road on a Saturday, you shouldn't be out here riding your bikes because it's not safe for you to do so. You see a picture of the road, it's a little narrow road. It's a little narrow road with no footpaths and no access. We have had buses, coaches, minibuses, young boys who play football aged 19 and 20 driving their Honda Civic Type Rs at 50 mile an hour along the road. We've got little speed bumps that are as much use as a chocolate fire guard that do not work. I would ask councillors to consider very carefully before granting further temporary planning permission to these structures. I would ask, as a resident of Westfield Road, that you take our consideration seriously, please.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Any member have any questions for the gentleman? You'd like to return to your seat, please?
That was the question.
We have a question, Councillor McCoffrey.
Yeah, just something occurred to me. Has Westfield Road been adopted by the council, or is it still an unadopted road?
As far as I understand, it's still an unadopted road. It's unadoptable apparently because it's too narrow. It's my understanding.
Jessica?
Yeah, I confirmed with Road this morning, and it's a private road.
Yeah, it's a private road.
It's a private road, okay. Any other members? In that case, I'd like you to turn to your seat, please. Thank you. We now have Mr. Lawrence Wilson and Mr. Watson, agent and applicant, I presume. Again, although it's a joint presentation, you'll have 3 minutes, gentlemen.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thanks for letting me have time to speak to you today. My name is Alan Watson. I am chairman of Heston Rovers Football Club. Our application today is extremely important to us, and I would like to explain why. We're a football club of 300 plus members, including 50 volunteers who are either coaches or committee members. Heston Rovers were the first amateur club in Dumfries and Galloway to achieve community club status awarded from the Scottish Football Association, which is in recognition of our involvement with the local community, which has just seen us just this year working with St Joseph College, Georgetown School, hosting both rural primary schools and Good Neighbours football tournaments and holding a charity match. Continuation of permission to house these porta cabins at Maryfield is vital for the day-to-day running of the club. We acknowledge the temporary permission has been in place for 5 years. However, within this period, we have progressed things in that we have installed a new access road to Maryfield from Kelwood Road, thus drastically reducing the traffic on Westfield Road. This was done at great cost and time to ourselves. Our original plan for Maryfield was to have a sports hub, which was to include a new clubhouse and a 3G pitch. As a committee, we focused in on researching existing facilities in Scotland and the funding routes that were available and set up a separate development committee within the club. However, once the new 3G pitch was awarded to Queen of the South, we decided to look at a clubhouse only. Since then, we have discussed funding for a new facility with various bodies and have had initial plans drawn up with regard to the structure to be put in place. With regard to the hedge, we have items stolen from it, and we are in the process of getting a local contractor to replace it. Finally, I applaud the case officer's recommendation to approve the application and would hope you would agree with that decision.
Thank you, sir. Are you waiting to answer questions, Mr. Wilson, or do you have something to add?
I have something to add, Chair, if I may. I'll be brief.
You still have 1 minute.
Will you hear someone speak? Heston Rovers Football Club have a 50-year lease on this ground. It seems to have escaped the neighbours of the development that wish to object to these matters, that in fact there had been a 1.5-storey football changing room with 11-inch cavity wall, very much up to date on that site, belonging to the council, on the very site that we are applying for just now, belonging to the council and used by the schools. Effectively, that was demolished. We were left to put something together, we as in Heston Rovers were left to put something together as quickly as we could on that pitch. The effectiveness of the porta cabins have been shown to be substantially useful for the 360 children from 5 years old upwards to change in inclement weather and during football matches. Now, it is the club's proposal, because we have, in fact, whether it's on the website or not, put out questions to interested parties who might, in fact, give us some plans and some drawings for the building of that area. So it would be wrong to say nothing has happened on that site regarding that matter. It just means that the website is not yet up to date. Lastly, when I was a member of the club, one of the issues that went up to committee was quite simply the poor people on Westfield Road, they're still complaining about our cars going back and forward. We put in at our cost a substantial new track, which will take quite easily minibuses and vans and cars along that route. Now, that was done at Heston Rovers' expense to help the Westfield people. Some of the members...
Can you draw it to conclusion, Ms Wilson?
I will, sir, thank you. Some of the members' parents on Saturday morning still forget that there's a new road. It takes time to get people into that vein of Heston Rovers do not come in that way, and they come in this route. They're getting that way. We're reminding them by letters. Chairman, I thank you for your patience. Thank you very much. I would ask if you go with the council members' recommendation to approve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Wilson. There are a number of members looking to speak. Councillor Nicholl, Councillor McKee, Councillor Dryborough and Councillor Dick, in that order, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr Wilson, you mentioned that there was a 50-year lease. How many years of that lease are still to run?
$46.
46.
46.
Councillor McKee.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I heard from Mr Watson and Mr Martin as well about the good job that Heston are doing up there, and I congratulate them, and you see it almost every week in the papers. But I think you've got to consider the neighbours. Westfield Road, when you were originally given permission, it was identified that Westfield Road was a narrow road, and you've got to treat the neighbours with a bit of courtesy. And I think given you've built a new road, and I'm not sure if it's over a year ago now since you put that in place, that I think your people should be more than comfortable in using that road and leaving Westfield Road alone and keeping off it. And that's something that it's not a planning matter, but I think it's something that I'd like to see you doing, and it would reflect on you very well. Just recently we've had applications for extensions, and given you've had this for 5 years and you're up for renewal, I'm kind of in the balance as to whether I should agree it or not, given you've had 5 years and nothing has happened with regards to putting a new building up as far as I can see. But I'll listen to the planners, etc.
Councillor McKee, I'm in session here, Councillor McKee, so you can't really offer a view at this point.
No, I was looking for their view on why they can't stop using Westfield Road is the main thing, Chair.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKee, and we'll stroke that particular observation from the debate at this point. Councillor Dryborough, please.
It's a question to Mr Martin and Mr Wilson, as he was a member of the Heston Rover. Mr Watson. Mr Martin came up with the idea that your business plan was if, buts, what's, cans and all that. I'm just wondering what your business plan actually is.
like any voluntary group of people in Dumfries and Galloway, there isn't a lot of money about just now. We know that that's a fact. I'm sure the council know that's a fact. So from month to month, there are always discussions about business plan, where do we go next? Now, to be frank, after paying for the road from Kelwood Road into the site, a fairly substantial road, in consideration for, I think the council is wrong, we do consider the neighbours. That road was put in place simply for the neighbours. We then use the other road. Regarding the business plan, there is a valid business plan. It's not part of the application. If the business plan is wanted by the council, it would have been asked for by the case officer. We're simply asking to give us another 3 years so we can get back on our feet after the costs of this road. If you think we're wrong in putting the road in, well, I would disagree with that. I think we've really considered the neighbours. That road was to take the pressure off Westfield Road. Some parents will still use that. They have the right to use it. You may call it a private road, but there's a public right of way through that road. Anyone's entitled to use it. Thank you.
Happy with that, Councillor Driver? I think that might as well, or might have also addressed the one point that Councillor Key raised, which was about the long-term intention of the club in relation to Westfield Road. Is that still the case, that it is a right of way? Obviously people are entitled to use it, but you would persuade Heston Rovers members to use the alternative route to gain access to your place?
We won't agree with you more. I mean, letters have gone out on a regular basis to members of the club and their parents. The unfortunate thing is that parents on a Saturday morning are busy people like the rest of us, and they forget. It's as simple as that. For a long while, we had a notice at the bottom of the road, please use the Kelwood Road access. Now, we're quite happy to put that notice back out again. It's a substantial notice. If the neighbours don't mind, we'll put it at the end of the road.
Thanks for that, Mr Olsen. Councillor Dick, Councillor Ted Thompson, and Councillor McCaughty in that order, and then Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the subject of the road, am I right in understanding, looking at the papers, that the road is at off here? Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dick. Councillor Ted Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 56 of this application, 4.5, one of the points made there is that a delay has been caused by the proposed facilities being accommodated at another site within the region, and that has led to a loss of funding on the current proposal. Are you actually saying that if that hadn't occurred, you would have progressed a permanent building?
I think what we were talking there was Crown South Road, the 3G pitch. Our plan was to have a 3G pitch and a clubhouse, so obviously a bigger facility there. We then had to change our mind because we didn't believe there was sufficient avenue for 3G pitches in Dumfries.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor McCaughty.
Yeah, I mean, if Mr Martin and Mr Wilson could give us a guarantee, I'm not sure whether we could put in as a planning condition that they would put a sign at the end of the road saying no access except for residents, and indeed they could actually put a bollard just for that lamppost or whatever it is. They put a bollard there in the middle of the road, that would deny any access except by bicycle or foot, which you'd expect athletes to use. It would also allow the residents to have access to their own properties without interfering with their rights. We did be prepared to put a bollard up, but that would definitely discourage anyone from taking a motor car in there in the future.
Sorry, just to clarify, as we look at the picture, are you talking about a bollard just near those cars? Is that where you're...
No. Before you even get anywhere near the cars, you get number 15, I believe, on the right-hand side here, which is the last house that requires access off that road. So as soon as you're past number 15's access, if you put a bollard there, that would stop any access of vehicles into that parking area.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought we would have a problem with that. The only thing I would say is that some of the residents do actually use that Heston car park there to park their own cars, so would that go against what they were looking at? We would be happy to do it.
At the end of the day, the car park is not a mutual thing of households there like the road. The car park belongs to Heston Rovers. It's part of the 50-year lease from the council.
Yes.
So therefore, what I'm trying to do is to give the rights back to the people who stay on the road there, a sign at the start of the road and a bollard in the middle of the road, and that way you could ensure that nobody would access that site from Westfield Road. They would access it off Kelwood Road. Now, if you were to give me an undertaking on that, I think I could happily go along with the extension.
I think maybe whilst they might want to do that, we don't have any authority or power to impose such a condition, and as it's a private road, it would be a matter for the owners of the private road whether or not they agreed to such an arrangement. It's something that Mr Wilson and Mr Watson could explore, but it's not something we could put in a condition, and I wouldn't want them to be punished for saying they would do something and then later that didn't happen when it's not in their control anyway. So whilst they might volunteer to do such a thing, that would be exactly what it was, a voluntary arrangement that the council have no authority on.
That's what I'm asking. If you're prepared to do that, I'm more than happy. I mean, I know that area pretty well, and as they say, there used to be the changing rooms for St Joseph's College there, but the amount of traffic that's generated by the football club now is far, far greater than when it was a school playing field. And I can't see any of the residents having any objections. If that stops vehicles accessing their roads, particularly the weekends when they want a bit of peace and quiet, then I think we'd solve all the problem.
I can see they're both not in agreement. I wouldn't want any more than that. They've acknowledged that they will explore that opportunity, for want of a better word, and it will not form part of any decision that we want to make should we be minded to allow this extension to continue. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with your sentiments, your last sentence there. In regards to the question that's come to my mind, what impact would it be if these containers were to be removed? What impact would that have on the club?
They're not supplying matter either.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah. You can respond. It's just that we're trying to deal with planning matters and we seem to be straying into matters that are purely a concern to the club rather than a planning matter.
These facilities are used for changing rooms. We have 5 11-a-side teams and probably about another possibly 100 kids that change there on Saturdays and Sundays when they're playing at home. As you can see, they give protection from the wind, the rain, everything. And with the Scottish weather that we have, then it would be a massive impact. We also have, as you can imagine, with 300 plus members, huge administrative work that we need to do, and we have an office in the setup where we do that. Okay.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you for a comprehensive reply on occasions. Are there any other questions for the applicant and his agent? In that case, if you kind enough to return to seats, gentlemen, members are now in session. Councillor Dryborough, Councillor Ted Thompson, Councillor Maitland in that order.
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, I've got to agree with the chairman of the club there that registering players is quite an onerous task, and you do certainly need facilities within the club. As you're aware, Chair, I've got a lot to do with Annan Athletic being their first aid officer, and we've seen the benefits health-wise and that for young people, and benefits locally for those, and I think even the objector has agreed to that particular thing. And this situation, however, there's obviously some concerns, but Heston Rovers are there trying to sort that out, and they need time to actually do that. Now, I'm not sure if it's the first, second or third extension that they've actually got there, but I think they're trying to get on with things and improve the situation and facilities actually up there. In that respect, I have got absolutely no problem in going with the recommendations in this, but I'm happy to listen to other members.
Thank you, Councillor Driver. Is that a proposal, or do you just intend to wait until other members speak? Thank you. In that case, Councillor Ted Thompson.
I'd actually concur with what Councillor Driver has said, but I'm prepared to actually propose that this extension is granted.
Thanks for that. Councillor Driver appears to be happy to second that. I've got Councillor Maitland, Councillor Wood and then Councillor McCaughey in that order, please.
Well, Chairman, I think that we haven't actually explored Mr Martin's assertion that we should think very carefully before we continue to extend temporary permissions. And with your permission, I'd ask the officers to comment on that assertion, because I think that's quite important that we actually tease that out at this stage.
I am more happy to do that, Councillor Maitland. I'll ask Judith to respond and then ask David to summarise for us. Jessica, where's Judith come from? That's my favourite hobby, by the way, Jessica.
As stated in the start of the report, it's not always best practice to continually renew permissions which aren't considered acceptable as permanent structures. But it does allow for councils to make decisions on the basis of information and justification that's submitted. And you often find in cases such as voluntary organisations, schools, they don't have the money, so they need the extra time to generate funding. So it's really, I say, it's not considered best practice, but it's up to, if a justification is provided, then it does allow for temporary permissions to be renewed. Don't know if you know.
Thanks for that, Jessica. I'll just ask David if he has anything to add, and then I'll ask Councillor Maitland if she's satisfied with that response.
And basically, Jessica summed it up. I mean, you shouldn't be using temporary permissions by default to grant permanent permissions because you renew them ad infinitum. I think in this case there is enough information that's been provided and justification by the applicant to allow one further renewal. Whether we'll be willing to give a further renewal, we would have to look at that in due course. But certainly, on the basis of the information that's been provided, we're happy to support it for this particular application.
Councillor Maitland, are you happy with that response?
Yes, I think that makes things quite clear, and I'm inclined to go along with the rest of the members, I suspect. But I think it's quite important that we do recognise that this could actually just go on and on and on and on and on. And that we should not be sending out messages that that's acceptable.
I think the observations members are making might not be lost on the applicant and the agent, and I would hope that if permission is granted that they achieve a speedy solution. I have Councillor Wood and Councillor McCaughey, please, in that order.
It's really just to build on the very point that Councillor Maitland was making, in that I believe that Mr Martin makes a very fair point in seeking a proper and robust business plan. If we're going to monitor this and to try and get an idea of where they are going, I would have hoped that there would have been some information with regard to just where they are at present and where their vision and focus is going to be. And while, yes, in the report there are elements to that, at the same time, I would have liked to have seen a proper business plan accompanying this particular application. Now, on that basis, I would be prepared to defer this decision today until such time as we get sight of such a business plan.
I think if that's what you're proposing, the normal procedure is we see if there's a seconder for your proposal and then see how members are minded to go before we enter any further into the debate. So you have suggested a deferral until a business plan is presented to us. Does any other member concur with that view? In that case, your request falls, but I'm sure again the applicant and agent will have that taken on board, and they may wish to offer further information. Should a member wish to contact them directly and speak to them, but it wouldn't form part of the debate and the decision making we have today. Last speaker, I think, for the moment is Councillor McCaughey.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm quite happy that we've gone through this. I think the club themselves realise, because I can recall when the first application came in way back in 2006, so it's 7 years since this first started, and I think if they get another 5 years, that they really have to get their act together. I think we all appreciate the work they do in the community. I would come back to the point I made about the sign at the road and a bollard. Now, I noticed the club were happy to go along with that. I also noted that Mr Martin, the objector, seemed to be reasonably happy with that would give him peace of mind vis-à-vis the traffic, which is one of the main areas. So I'd certainly encourage both the applicant and the objectors to get together, because they have a common interest in the road, and see if they can resolve this one. That would certainly give the objectors a bit of peace of mind. So I'd certainly encourage objectors and the applicant to get together, possibly after this meeting, and agree a wee course of action. I would certainly commend them to do that.
Thanks for these observations, Councillor McCaughey. Councillor McKee and then Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I'll apologise to you firstly for going off the script a wee bit earlier on. But I notice it says in the recommendations a period of 3 years. Councillor McCaughey said 5. I was looking for an extension, but I take it it's 3 years. And certainly, as I said earlier on, they're doing a good job up there, and I would encourage them to work with the residents and work as hard as they can to raise funding to get this completed within this 3-year period. Because if you come back for another extension, I don't know what would happen. I might not be here then, that's a different matter. But I'm certainly quite happy for the extension of 3 years, Chair.
Thanks for the point you raised, Councillor McKee. And as David said, should we ever receive another application that will be dealt with on its merits at that particular time, can Jessica tell us whether it is a 3 or 5 year period the application is for, and what the proposed approval is, please?
Yeah, the application is for a 3-year period. The previous application was for 5 years.
Okay, Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I really appreciate the residents' concerns in it, but I think the fact the football club has gone to the extent of actually putting in another road really suggests to me that they're obviously pretty serious about trying to mitigate the concerns of the residents, and I would just support the extension.
Unless I'm reading the situation wrong, it would appear that members are inclined to agree and approve as per the recommendation, and bear in mind that any other undertaking that the applicant agent has given will be a voluntary thing that we cannot impose, but we hope that they engage with the appropriate group and residents to try and resolve issues that have been brought to their attention. Thank you very much for that. Clerk, again, please.
Committee is determined to approve the application subject to the conditions as set out in the report.
Thank you very much, Paula. It's gone 12:30-ish. Do members want to stop for a 30-minute break and then resume back at 1 o'clock? Thank you very much. Suspended till 1 o'clock. Thank you. Councillor Maitland and Councillor Wood have declared an interest. They won't be present, and Councillor Diggle has had to leave for another engagement. So, we come to item 8, variation of condition 5 of planning permission 11/P/3/0503 to allow extended operating hours at Barbara Mill Quarry, Aldgirth, Dumfries. We have Planning Officer Pat Hannah here to introduce the application, and we have two objectors, Mrs Angela Beattie and Mrs Penelope Coles, on behalf of Aldgirth and District Community Council. So Pat, if you'd lead us through the presentation, please.
Thanks, Chair. Could I first of all apologise and announce a correction to the report at paragraph 1.5. If we could score out from the intention in the first line of 1.5 to operating hours in the third line, so that the sentence just simply reads now, the current application proposes to vary condition 5 as follows. I shall explain what the change means as I go through the presentation. The slide here shows the application site, and it also shows the historical quarry that existed from some time predating the 1970s in the yellow. The hatched yellow area is the original quarry, amounting to some 2.5 hectares. The rest of the site is shown in grey is the approved site that was approved under the planning application in 2011 and was approved by the Planning Applications Committee in 2012, subject to an amended condition on operating hours. It's these amended operating hours that are the subject of the application. The applicant in summary, is seeking a compromise position between the officer's recommended conditions for the original 2011 application, which reflected the applicant's proposed conditions, and the committee's final condition that was approved. The intention of that is firstly to allow extractive operations on the site within reduced hours from that originally proposed and recommended, and secondly allowing transportation of the material as originally proposed. So it is a compromise position that's being sought. The applicant's justification for this is set out in paragraph 4.3, and this relates mainly to operational and competitive need and claiming acceptable impact on residential amenity. Given that as officers we originally recommended approval, the current proposal offers an improvement to residential amenity from that situation that we originally recommended for approval, and therefore we support this application. Equally, committee members gave greater weight to residential amenity at the time of that original consideration, and therefore the key question for members is whether the applicant's justification is sufficiently compelling to overturn their original decision. The application is recommended by officers for approval.
Thanks for that, Pat. I have one question, but I'm quite happy to wait and see if members have questions before I pose mine. Does any member have any questions for the planning officer? Stephen Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually to do with the hours of operation, particularly on a Saturday. If I understand it, there was... This is 7 to 3 o'clock on a Saturday. Now, if you follow the logic from the rest of the week, you've got an additional hour proposed from 7 till 8 and an hour at the end of the day as well. Saturday, the operating hours would seem to finish at 1, but then there's an additional 2 hours, would that be right? For the loading, unloading, as it were, of vehicles. So I'm just wondering why that lack of consistency there.
Before you answer that, Pat, that was my question, but I was also going to make reference to the submission the agent has made on behalf of the applicant. Talks about residential amenity on page 67. And if you look at 4.5, the bottom paragraph, it says the working week is regarded Monday to Friday and Saturday morning, while Saturday afternoons, Sundays and public holidays would normally be regarded as a period of rest. So that's the submission the applicant or agent has made, and yet we are recommending that in fact operations are conducted during that period. Do you have a reason for that? And that would also address Stevens.
Yep, I can answer that question in that the quote from the planning advice note in paragraph 4.5 goes on to say that variations on these may be appropriate in some circumstances if agreements can be reached. The original proposal was for those extended hours to 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. There was no objection from the Environmental Standards Service on the basis of noise, subject to a condition limiting noise. Therefore, it was because that was what the applicant had proposed, there was no objection from a professional point of view to allowing that additional time on the Saturday afternoon, subject to noise limiting conditions to ensure that there wasn't an adverse impact in terms of noise during that period.
Thanks for that, Pat. Does any member have a question of planning officer at this time? No. In that case, we will have the first objector, who is Mrs. Angela Beattie, please, and you will be restricted to 3 minutes. And it's 5 minutes. Sorry, my apologies. It's 5 minutes, and I'll notify you 30 seconds to go. Sorry about that. It's 5 minutes.
Hello there. I'm Angela Beattie, and I live in one of the houses, one of the 3 houses that is directly closest to the proposed, well, the new access road and the quarry workings. Unfortunately, other residents would have attended today, but they're all working, so I kind of speak on their behalf as well. I've lived at my property for over 28 years, and up until bars took over this quarry, there has been no activity whatsoever that I know of in this quarry. All local residents in the area have already been affected by the operations of this company, and we've already been subjected to the noise and dust from the quarry. We've had lorries parked in bus stops, lorries reversing on the A76, as the gates at the quarry were actually closed. I personally have witnessed and have documented evidence about the amount of times that bars have actually breached the planning conditions in respect of their working hours. They have worked before 7 o'clock in the morning, and they have done this on a continual basis. One morning, my husband and I witnessed 3 lorries, which was a double trailer, an Arctic and a tipper, turning into the quarry at 6:50 in the morning. My husband stood outside and he watched, and by 7:15 that morning, 5 lorries came out of that entrance. Bars have continually breached their conditional hours, and even though they were issued notices from the council, they still continue to operate out with these hours. There's genuine concern about how much more disruption there will be, particularly when the new access road is operational and the quarry is working at full capacity. The 3 properties in our vicinity will not only have to bear with the A76 right at the front of us, but we will have basically another trunk road at the back of us, which will have heavy goods lorries passing both the front and the back. Surely this is not regular practice. In our region, how many other sand quarries of this size have residential properties so close and indeed have access directly onto a trunk road? This access would not have been accepted on any other trunk road in this area. Why does this company need to operate from 7 till 7? They're already operating, or they're allowed to operate, for 10 hours per day. Surely, as commented by other objectors, any loads needed for the following day should be loaded the previous day. Good management of loads could meet the needs of the industry and protect the residents too. The increased hours will increase concerns already identified by residents, and these include health, the dust. There are young kids in this area, and dust getting into your lungs is a very serious problem at any age. We've already been subjected to dust, and once again I have evidence to prove that. Our paving slabs around the back of the property are all marked already with the sand, and even a pressure washer cannot clean this properly now. In our circumstances, we only have one access to our house, which is at the back of the house, which is nearest the quarry, or nearest the road, sorry, which probably make our circumstances slightly different from the other residents. The noise, the amount of machines operating, who monitors this? There's certain details saying that they won't have all the machines operating at the same time. They will stop one of the hoppers or whatever the machine is when there's lorries moving in. Who monitors this? Road safety issues, there'll be problems with lighting. We have tried to negotiate with bars. We've had a couple of meetings with them, not to any satisfactory conclusion at all. I have basically been told if I complain any further to them, they will do whatever it takes to not work with us at all. The height of the bund is concerning. The levels of the access road, we were told, would be dug a wee bit deeper into the ground, but it appears higher, is what the drawings suggest. Recently, a water pump has been running for several days. This is noisy and sounds like someone sitting running a car. Even when the television's on, you can hear it. I believe that we're going to be subjected to 4 of these pumps running simultaneously. Our water Toby has been covered over in the field. I have concerns about flooding, but obviously because we haven't had any rain recently, I can't sort of...
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Sure. Who monitors that the company is working within the regulations of this site? The Planning Committee agreed at the meeting on the 25th of April to allow bars permission based on them operating in the agreed hours of 8 till 6 Monday to Friday, no workings on Saturday. This was the only thing in the approval which considered the people living in the vicinity of these workings. Why does it need to be changed? What I would ask is if anybody wanted to, is to come and have a look and just see what what I'm complaining about here, just to see how close this road is to our property. It's hard to tell how bad it's going to be once the lorries start running on the actual road.
Can you just draw that to conclusion, please?
Is that right?
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any question for Mrs. Beattie? In that case, thank you, Mrs. Beattie. If you'd return to your seat, be grateful. And Mrs. Coles, thank you. You'll have the same 5 minutes, Mrs. Coles, and I'll give you notice for 30 seconds to go.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of Oldgirton District Community Council, and I've got a few comments from Closeburn Community Council at the end. When this application was determined last year, councillors amended the recommended time of operation in response to the comments made by representatives, and many of the councillors making that unanimous decision are here today. Now, the planning officer has no option but to recommend approval in line with his previous application in April 2012 to maintain his professional consistency. But he does acknowledge in the report that councillors have the right to give more weight to the residential amenity as they did last year, and Oldgirton District Community Council hopes that you will do so again. BAR is asking for 18 extra hours working a week, all at unsocial hours when people are trying to enjoy their homes. An extra 5 hours on Saturday morning for extraction work, and then 3 more additional hours on Saturday, 1 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon for loading, an extra 8-hour day. And on weekdays, they want 2 extra hours each day for loading, an hour in the morning and 1 in the evening. The argument that they put forward for needing to be on sites for 8 o'clock in the morning just doesn't work. What construction site will want a load late Saturday afternoon? If a site needs a load early in the day, then the lorry can be loaded and removed from the quarry the night before. Now, PAN 50 gives guideline times, but allows for individual variation according to circumstances, like homes next to the site. And PAN 50 keeps Saturday afternoon free as a rest period. The proposal is being put forward as if loading is a preferable quiet option, but the loading area and the loading shovel is operated close to the houses and so causes the greatest noise nuisance. The extraction will move further away from the cottages towards the south, added to which the loading will involve the arrival and departure of the lorries on the access hall road to the back of the cottages. And this access road dominates the cottages at the back. It's far higher than we expected from the site plan, and any use will be disruptive in terms of noise, lights and activity. The fact that some of the property is affected on the A76 does not mean that they should have to put up with lorries going by their back gardens and windows. They should be afforded more protection so they can enjoy their homes and gardens. The original noise assessments show that the quarrying activities are much louder than the existing noise from the A76. And people haven't moved into these houses knowing that there was a working quarry nearby. The council's own evaluation rolls show that it's not been worked for 34 years, dormant since 1978, when indeed a Mrs. Kay of the planning department assessed the site. The quarry entrance, a Mrs. J.K., that's all I can say. I also have some comments from Closeburn Community Council because the quarry entrance and the houses above at White Spots are in their Community Council area. No one was able to attend this meeting, but they asked me to pass on to councillors their strong objection to any extension of working hours, extraction or loading. And as frequent users of the A76 into Dumfries, they've been alarmed at the use of the entrance into the stonemason's yard, which was meant to be blocked off. It's a dangerous corner, even with a banksman present, and there have been situations where the lorries have been queuing to gain access. And gravel across the road has caused problems, and there doesn't seem to be any wheel washing going on to help prevent this happening.
30 seconds left, Mrs. Scholes.
Thank you. So please, can we protect our residents and refuse this application to change the conditions? Thank you.
Thanks very much for your presentation, Mrs. Scholes. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Scholes? Councillor Ted Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Coles, you're speaking on behalf of Algarth and District Community Council. One of the points you've made on page 63 of 104, D, you're talking about dust actually being emanated and how significant it is. Would you care to enlarge on that?
Yes, we had our largest community council meeting ever when this item was put on the agenda. People felt very strongly and turned up to support local residents, but we were shown pictures of the dust that is actually appearing inside people's houses. As soon as they open the door, there's a waft of dust that comes in, and so they're getting a layer of dust and film all over, and they're not actually able to open their windows in the summer. This is just from the door opening and closing as they go in and out. But we were very shocked by the amount of dust in those cottages below the Hall Road. There's been no bunds put up, there have been no tree planting, no landscaping, and the dust from the lorries as they come along, lots of them are going out not covered, and so there's a lot of dust blowing around, as Sandra told you.
A supplementary, Councillor Thompson.
Are you actually saying that the dust is created by the quarry workings or by the movement of the lorries?
I think it's both. Yes, from both.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member have any questions for Mrs. Cole? In that case, if you care to return to your seat, Mrs. Cole, thank you very much. We're now in session. I have 3 members. I have Councillor McKee, Councillor McCaughtry and Councillor Carruthers. In that order, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's just in 1.6 at the top of page 63. It's understood Transport Scotland are due to issue opening permit imminently. Has that been done? Or could you bring us up to date with that, please?
Okay, thanks. I did check with Transport Scotland. If you can bear with me, I'll just find my email. And on the 14th of October, they confirmed that they were awaiting a copy of a minute of agreement, a legal document from the applicants. But this was followed the same day by the applicant saying that they'd provided it several weeks previously. So there's some uncertainty as to what is happening in terms of the road opening permit. But every time I speak to Transport Scotland, they confirm that it is getting closer. No definitive date has been provided as yet.
Okay, happy with that, Councillor McKee.
That's fine. That answers that question. This dust issue, I don't suppose there's anything we can do about it. What about watering the road, something like that, and during dry spells? And the other issue, my concern is, given what's in some of these parts of this paper, my concern would be if we allow extension of hours, they'll also extend not just the load in the lorries, but the digging a quarry surface, blasting and that type of thing, and that would be my concern. So at the present moment, I certainly wouldn't be in support of extending the hours.
Thanks, Councillor McKee. I suppose the question is posed, given the observations that the planning officer makes on page 6 to 5 about other matters of non-material nature, what measures can we take as a planning authority to monitor activity on a site if permission were granted? I think that's what Councillor McKee was alluding to among other observations that he made.
Thanks, Chair. Planning permission is granted on the basis of the proposal that's put forward and the conditions that are applied. We would investigate, or can investigate, any breaches of control that are reported to us. As a planning authority, we normally wouldn't have resources to continuously monitor a site on the basis that we can't have someone on site all the time, that there aren't the resources for that. But if we have breaches of control that are reported to us, we will investigate that and take any action that is appropriate and necessary.
Thanks for that, Pat. Okay, I've got Councillor McCaughey, Councillor Connor and Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chairman. I think this one's pretty clear cut. It's only 18 months ago since we granted this permission. We took into account all the representations made by the public then, and specifically about the operating hours. The applicant hasn't even bothered to turn up, which would have allowed us to question as to why we did these hours, etc., etc. I think it just shows a utter contempt for this planning committee. And on that basis, I would refuse this application now on the grounds that it's not been proven to the satisfaction of this committee that these extra hours are needed. Simple as.
Okay, I take it that's a proposal. I have Councillor Connors, Councillor Dick and then Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chair. I think the way the committee is moving towards possibly refusing this, I remember being on this application and I agreed with it at the time, and we did have great debate over the hours and we did restrict them to what they are. Now we're here nearly a couple of years, 18 months, nearly a couple of years later, the impact that decision that was made at that point is having on local residents. I mean, I would like to have seen a site visit so I could just see it for myself, the difference between what it was then and now. But if it's going towards sticking with the original hours, I would retract that, so I'll hear what everybody else has got to say.
Okay, so at this moment in time you're not proposing a site visit, is that right?
That's correct, Chair, until such time. See which direction the committee takes.
I'm satisfied with that, Councillor Carruthers. Okay, that's Councillor Dick, please.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just have clarification? I'm certainly concerned about the issues that are raised about by the community councils about levels of dust, but I just wanted clarification on its relevance to this specific application. The other thing is, I'm minded to go with Councillor McCaughey because looking through the original committee decision, this seems rather spurious that the applicant has suggested that the noise impact from the operation of plant was what they had in mind, but not site activities in general. What's the difference between the operation of plant and site activities in general? I think this is a rather spurious argument. Excuse me. The other thing he says the applicant has said is that the remaining any operation that cannot service the first load of the day will not supply the remaining requirements and therefore is uncompetitive in the marketplace. Surely that would have been known to him at the time of the original application. Those are two observations and probably indicate the way in which I would go on it, but could I just have clarification just on this dust issue? It's maybe an issue if this is not planning consideration in this particular application. It's obviously something that needs to be taken up with another agency.
Okay, thanks. The application is purely for variation of operating hours, and so that is what the committee is determining today is purely the variation of operating hours. Whilst it's certainly not my position to attempt to defend the applicant in any way here, and I'm not doing that, they have commenced development without or they've commenced development in breach of planning control. The development, as was approved, with the mitigation measures that should have been put in place with the original set of conditions, should have been sufficient to overcome and resolve these concerns. There's clearly a number of elements of that permission that have not yet been put in place. And if the development is implemented in accordance with all of the mitigation measures that were previously agreed and approved, then certainly it's anticipated that many of these issues should be resolved.
Thanks, Pat. I think we need to be very careful, because if you start making an objection or basing an objection on things like dust and wheel washing, etc., the applicant can bring forward solutions to that. What Councillor McCaughey was not saying that. He was saying that he supported the decision made by members last time that was made a year and a half ago.
Well, this application is a bit of variation to ours, that's what I was referring to. The things about dust, whilst that might be a concern to the people staying there, this isn't part of what we're considering today. We're just considering these hours, and as far as I'm concerned, they're not necessary, they haven't been proved.
I was highlighting that very point, and I was agreeing with what you're saying, Councillor McCaughey. That's the point you're raising, and that if you add dust, etc., it gives the applicant a reason to come back with mitigation measures, whereas if it's a straightforward refusal because of the circumstances or issues raised by Councillor McCaughey, that makes it much cleaner. But anyway, I have Councillor Geddes and then Councillor Driver.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Chairman, I think it's absolutely imperative that, quite clear as to what, the basis of what Councillor McCaughey has moved, because that was why I asked to participate in the debate, because quite frankly, I would have wanted, and that with the greatest respect to Tom, is not what he said originally. He made reference to the fact that the applicant not turning up today, and he used the phrase, and on that basis. Now, to me, that would have been wholly inappropriate, Chairman, to have used, as it were, for any basis for refusing this application. But I've got clarification from him. I'm gratified to that extent. I think we'll go back to the conclusion of paragraph, and I've listened in particular. I think the case officer's explanation has been particularly helpful. When we go back, as far as I'm concerned, to paragraph 4.8, sir, and the key question being whether the applicant's justification, is sufficiently compelling to overturn the original decision. Well, as far as I'm, in my view, Chairman, I am not persuaded that that justification, or alleged or purported justification, is sufficiently compelling to overturn the original decision. And I think we should take our decision today on that basis, and that way we ensure that it's a safe decision.
That's what I was trying to get in, and I think quite rightly 4.6 is the officer's observations on where we are, and that's his invitation to make a judgment based on that. Do you want to add anything to that, David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That was actually the very point I was going to make, that the original reason being that there wasn't the need, the case hadn't been made for the need for it, I would suggest probably isn't a competent reason, but the way Councillor Geddes has just phrased it probably would tick the box in being a safe reason, that what you're getting at is this would affect the amenity of the people nearby by extending the hours, and that's wholly within your call there. Just for the record, the applicant did want to attend the meeting, but unfortunately they didn't get in touch. You've got to confirm your willingness and desire to attend these committee meetings no later than 48 hours before the meeting, and they only got in touch yesterday afternoon, as I understand it, so that was too late. But they had expressed a willingness to attend, in fact a desire to attend, but they were too late.
Thanks for your input, Alistair. Councillor Driver.
Thanks, Chair. There was mention in the presentation by the objectors about potential breaches in conditions. I'm just wondering if we know of any of those previous breaches of conditions in the previous application.
We've been made aware of them, but the report's quite clear that we cannot take that in consideration today. I don't know, it might even be prudent to discuss it, because it says on the report under NB page 65, other non-material nature have been raised. But what the planning officer did do was tell you that these matters were of concern and that he was aware of them. I just don't think it might be appropriate that we discuss them, but we know of them. And I think that's why I asked, what can the council do to monitor the activities of this company were we to approve it? And I think the answer quite rightly was, we're on a person to do that on a regular basis. It would be if we received a complaint that would be investigated accordingly. That's what has happened in the past. We just kind of, it's not a planning consideration.
Thanks very much, that's clarified.
Thank you, Councillor Dick.
It's just to the point that Councillor Geddes had raised regarding whether we feel that the applicant has justified in a compelling way the need to overturn the committee's original decision. And I think for the reasons I gave when going through their lists of justification, I'm certainly not convinced in any shape or form. I was interested to hear that the applicant had want to, and I'll just ask the question. I'm not pushing for it, but it may well be that we even want to possibly consider a deferral to hear from the applicant. But I'm only just posing that without really having any desire. I think we just make a decision today.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dick. I don't think we can make a deferral without a request from the applicant for such a measure, but we do have a suggestion from Councillor Carruthers earlier that he may like to come back and seek a site visit. So with that to establish, then Councillor Geddes would want to come in after that.
I think it's been well summarised the way people have put forward. Councillor Geddes brought it up very well, the way the argument for, and the reason that the argument to leave it as is, I should say, and not to approve the recommendation under condition 5. But it would have given me more clarity on what effect it has actually had on the amenity. But if we're going to leave the hours as they were agreed back in April 2012, I'm happy to leave it at that point unless the bulk of the committee is insisting otherwise.
Thank you for that, Councillor Carruthers. Without being presumptuous, it doesn't appear to me that that's the way the committee are looking to move this forward, but I'll leave that to the committee to decide in a minute. Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I would be fundamentally opposed, and that's putting it mildly, to any suggestion, in fact, would defer, determining this application today. I suggest that we do determine it today. I would also suggest, without being presumptuous, that we should defer it. We should determine it on the basis that Freudian slip, Chairman. We should determine it on the basis that was previously indicated and previously outlined. I would also seek your guidance, sir, and your leave that once we've done that, would it be appropriate to revert briefly to alleged breaches, as it were, of existing conditions, and to try to chart a way forward, as it were, to have these addressed, inter alia, to give additional protection, as it were, to residents and their amenity.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Geddes. I know that the residents are aware that these matters have been raised with local members, and local members have taken steps to try and deal with the matter through the proper and due process, working with officers or then discussing with officers and asking officers to address each individual complaint as they're received. So that has happened. I don't know whether maybe members might want to avail themselves of the information at another date, another time, simply for their personal knowledge and reference. But it shouldn't be in this forum today, I don't think. Grateful to you again for your input, Alistair, and I think, do members think that a site visit is an appropriate way forward, or do you have enough information to make a decision, informed decision today? If you're comfortable with that, Councillor Carruthers, we will make a decision today. Does any member have a proposal? Councillor McCaughey put forward a proposal, then Councillor Geddes sort of informally amended that in some way. In that case, we have a proposal from Councillor. If Councillor McCaughey is comfortable enough with that.
I'm happy with that. I think that the thing is, we don't want the hours extended. Simple as, let's find the best forwards to make sure we don't get any comeback for this recalcitrant company.
Okay, and in that case, the application being refused, and I'll ask the committee clerk to clarify that and present a form of words that are appropriate for the occasion.
Just before I make an announcement, can we clarify the form of words I picked up as the extension is unacceptable due to the negative impact on the amenity of adjoining residential properties. In that case, the committee has determined to refuse the application on that ground.
Everybody happy with that? Super, okay. Thank you very much. In that case, we now move to item 9. Planning application for changes to play area and installation of play equipment. Amended proposals to that previously approved under 12/P/2/0202 at Victoria Street, Kirkpatrick, Durham. Now there is a...
Chair, point of order. The councillors who were out, we should ask them back in.
My apologies. Although Councillor Wood has said he won't be back, he has another engagement. It's only right that we get Councillor Maitland back. Thanks for that, Councillor Dick. apologies, Councillor Maitland, I was leaving you out for the rest of the meeting. We have a note on item 9 about speaking, and there's no name associated because I believe there is an electronic message that is to be presented or read to the committee, and that will be done before we get the presentation on the play equipment. And the planning officer is Beth Halliday. Beth.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, there is an electronic message, and I'll read that out just shortly. This proposal is for changes to a play area and the installation of play equipment. They are amended proposals to that previously approved under 12/P/2/0202. And this is at Victoria Street in Kirkpatrick, Durham. The previous 2012 application was for the extension of the recreation building to provide toilets, installation of an air source heat pump, and 3 lighting columns. A play area was proposed in the 2012 application, and point 1.3 on page 71 within the background of the report explains why an amended proposal was required. A full assessment of the proposals are set out in the committee report, but before I take you through the presentation, one point is to be noted, and that's the electronic mail that Councillor Dempster alluded to. Received this on Monday the 21st, and it said it was from Mr. Ian Gass of 7 Victoria Street, and it says, as discussed briefly on the phone this morning, I confirm that I am suspending my objections to the above application, having had a further conversation with David Wishart, who reaffirmed the Recreation Association's commitment to involving objectors in the detailed layout of the play equipment should they receive approval of their planning application. So I'll take you through this is the location plan. It's to the south of Victoria Street in the recreational ground. It's a grassed area next to the recreational bothy building. And the block plan shows an indicative situation where the play equipment is situated. It's quite faint, but you can see a blue line just to the southwest of the bothy building, which was the play area that was in the 2012 application, which is obviously considerably smaller than the one that they're now asking for. And this is just, again, just a cross-section. The land is generally flat, but obviously there is a bit of an incline towards the rear gardens of Victoria Street. And this was really just trying to give an idea of just, as I say, it is indicative, the placing of it, but it's giving an idea of, for example, the tree house, which is the largest part of it, and showing it next to a dyke and a hedge, which then borders on to the back of, in this case, 7 and 9 Victoria Street. And I'll just take you through, just briefly, obviously, the details of, there's a tree house, which is the largest element of it, at 3.6 metres in height. There's a zigzag twister, a log swing, a bird nest swing, a roundabout, a Burma bridge, a slide, and a balance weaver. The slide, balance weaver, Burma bridge are all in the distance, the balance beam are all in the same part of the equipment. Going on to the pictures, this is taken from just outside, next to the church, in the church car park. It's a long distance view, but it was really just trying to give you an overall view of the back of Victoria Street. To the centre of the picture, slightly to the right of it, is the bothy buildings. It's quite hard to actually, because of the distance, but that's just showing the overall site from a distance from Church Road. This is now actually in the recreational ground. This is standing at the community buildings, looking west, and at the moment you can see goalposts and picnic tables that are there. So obviously the faraway point, nearer to the trees and the stone dyke to the right, is where the equipment is proposed. This is me standing on the little footpath that comes from Church Road, just looking towards the Bothy buildings, towards the east. And just the opposite view, again, standing on the path, but looking towards the site and towards the northwest of the site. And this is just to try and show the objections that we have are from the people that are in some of these buildings along Victoria Street that direct their gardens directly back onto the site. Just for a reference point, for example, you can see where there are solar panels in one of the rear gardens. That's the rear garden of number 7. Just to give you a reference, the large house up on the left hand, the double-storey house, is number 1. There is another play park in Kirkpatrick, Durham. It's in St David's Street, but it is, as it says in the report, geared up more for slightly older children. And again, just another view of that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Judith. It might have been helpful had we had a photo montage or something that would show the scale of the proposed installation in the existing landscape, but that's by the by. I think the first thing we have to deal with is this electronic message, simply because if we accept that the correspondent reserves the right to object later on, once we make a decision today, that would then require another full application to be made by the applicant if there is a material change to the layout of the play equipment, because you have a proposed layout here and that's what you're being asked to approve. So there is a technicality that we need to deal with, and I'd be pleased to hear what members' views have. Councillor McKee.
Has the Recreation Association been asked about whether they're willing to work with the neighbours? Because I think what you've shown us already is an excellent site, and it'd be a pity to lose out.
Yes, as far as I can gather, there have been some informal talks with the objectors, because in the email, Mr Gass alluded to that when he said that he had had a further conversation with David Wishart, who is the convener of the Recreation Association. And another email. Yeah, there's another email that I got from Mr Gass on the 16th of October, where he says, following a meeting of objectors to this application with members of the Recreation Association, I attach a letter suspending my objections to the proposal, and fuller details are to be found. So that was the initial email that I got from Mr Gass. And because there was something in the letter that I wanted to question him about, he then sent the follow-up email on the 21st. So it does sound as though they have been I
think, Councillor McKee, it's not about working with the association. It's about if we approve an application today, my feeling is that Mr Gass will no longer have the opportunity to object, either that or by reserving the right, by suspension of his objection, he is inviting or suggesting that there may be a re-application required. But if you want to come back, that's fine. Then it's Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor Dryburgh.
No, I was just expressing that view to see what the view of the other side was, if you like, Chair. Because if they weren't willing to talk to the guy, then we need to look at it in a different way. But if they're willing to talk to one another, I think they should be encouraged, and I would go down the road of accepting this, but obviously the other members to hear.
Just the point I'm trying to make is that we accept it, that's it. There is no discussion. Councillor Carruthers.
Chair, I think you just clarified that was my understanding. I thought you'd put forward a different view. If we agree this today, it's a full application. It's approved unconditionally, so if approved, that decision's been made at that point. I mean, I suppose how far, we touched on it earlier, as far as the non-material variation is concerned, how much discretion is delegated to the planning officials when it comes to that? How much discretion do they have through negotiation with the applicant?
I'm sure Beth will speak to that, but if it's a non-material variation, that'll be fine. If it's a substantial change, then Beth, please.
Yes, I did have an informal discussion about roughly 3-4 weeks ago with the applicant, the agent where they'd obviously had this meeting that was talked about in the email of the 16th. I did say at that point that if they did want to change the site at that point, the way that they were talking potentially could have been material. And obviously that may have then impacted on other people that hadn't objected further along Victoria Street. And because of that, I asked them to confirm whether they wanted to keep the site with the red line as it was or not. And they obviously have. So.
Before that, Councillor Driver, David wants to just say a few things. Oh, okay. David?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if it helps keep things simple, to the best of my knowledge, you can't really suspend an objection. Yeah. You either submit it and sustain it, or you withdraw it. You can't have it both ways, really. So I would treat this as the objection stands. If the applicant wishes to speak with objectors and do in the same way as with turbines, we have micro-siting where it can be moved a small degree. If within the red line of the application site some of the equipment were to be moved a metre or so either way, that's really of no consequence. That clearly is a non-material variation. As Beth has just said, if they're basically talking about shifting the red line in the whole application site, that's a materially different proposal, the same way that this application was required compared to the original one, then a further application would be required and different people notified. But I think really, as a committee, if it keeps it simple, you have objections to this one. Even if Mr. Gass was to remove objection, you've got 5 others who are still objecting and haven't suspended, withdrawn or anything else. So I would say... good point, yes. Haven't tried that one, yes, you're right. Yes.
That was why Beth's obviously sharper than you. That's why it came to us, because he was aware of the implications that only 5 objectors that would dealt with by delegated authority. Councillor Guinness.
Chairman, are we not in very real danger of tying ourselves in knots here? You know, we've unnecessarily so, I may say. We've got an application before us. We're obliged to determine that application. If Mr. Gass, or I would, for the record, I would agree with Mr. Sutty, he cannot suspend an objection. But if Mr. Gass chooses to exercise that discretion, you know, and is prejudiced as a consequence, that's his problem. No this committee's, no the council's as planning authority. So therefore, my view, sir, is we proceed as a corps today and we determine this application and get on and do the business.
I think all members are minded in the same way. I've got Councillor Dick and I'll come back to Councillor Carruthers.
I would just simply move the recommendations.
I'll allow Councillor Carruthers the opportunity to speak.
I would agree with that entirely, but the point that was raised is the fact it's at committee now. It has no effect that if it had been withdrawn, it probably would have been dealt under the delegated powers. Going with the same recommendations, so that's okay procedurally.
Okay, so I can take it then that this is unanimously agreed by the committee.
Committee is determined to approve the application unconditionally as set out in the report.
Okay, we go to item 10, the erection of substation control building and compound, formation of underground cable route and cable connection point, access tracks and associated borrow pits at Dunhill Substation, Carsfairn Forest, near Carsfairn. Planning officer is Judith Turnbull.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for a control building and associated works in Carsfairn Forest. This is the location plan. You'll see from the location plan in the committee papers, I think it's page 77, that the application is situated within the heart of Carsfairn Forest. And this shows the application site in more detail. It consists of 2 parts. The part at the north is where the main infrastructure would be located. That's the control building, the compound and the car park. And the application site extends south, and that's mainly the access, which consists of two new access roads which would connect existing roads and make a more direct link, and 4 borrow pits, which you can see tailing into the access road. These works form part of an upgrading programme collectively known as the South West Scotland Renewables Connection Project.
to connect the Windy Standard 2 wind farm to the proposed power line via the Dunhill substation. There are 2 other associated applications, and these have been granted this year under delegated powers. This is a closer-in block plan of the north of the site. You can see the infrastructure area. If I try to point it out with the laser, I'm not so good at this. No, it's not working today that I can get. The site along the left-hand side with the 2 boxes at the top, that's a Sealing Ends compound. That's one of the other associated applications which has been granted. And on the south of the main road running through the site, that's the main compound for the substation. So these are the 2 north and south of the application site, the other 2 applications that have already been granted in connection with these works. This is an additional drawing that I requested showing details of palisade fencing. It shows the location of the palisade fencing which surrounds the control building, car park and the compound, and you can see at the side there are indicative details. Condition 4 basically covers the palisade. It covers not palisade but the general enclosure fencing which would have to be approved. This is a control building and plan and elevations. It's got a footprint of 360 metres, single storey, and finishes are to be approved under condition 3 if to be agreed under condition 3 if members are minded to approve. Moving on to the images, basically it's situated in the forest, so this is kind of view of very similar images really. Well, kind of, yeah. This is looking across the junction into part of the site, the smaller part of the site, and across the road from that, which you can't really see, is where the main control building would be located, which I'll come on to in a moment. This is looking southeast along Gallowreglow Road up to where the existing wind turbines are. The site's on the left-hand side of this road. This is looking down Gallowreg Road, and part of the site is on the right-hand side, and the main part of the site is across the junction, diagonally across that junction in the distance. And this is looking east along the track. The control building, the main infrastructure part of the site would be located to the right-hand side, but there is part of the site on the left-hand side. And on the left-hand side is also where the substation building application is, and the Sealing Ends compound application is on the right-hand side in the far distance. The access is taken from that road. Moving out of the trees now onto the access road. This is a view along part of the access road showing Borrow Pit 2, well, an existing quarry and Borrow Pit 2 is located in this area. And this is a view looking down the access road. This is looking back towards Borrow Pit 2 from Borrow Pit 3, looking north. And in the distance on the right-hand side of the image is Borrow Pit 3, and this has been taken from about Borrow Pit 2. And this is more of a general view along the existing road looking up towards Gallowreg. Just to summarise, there are no objections from any of the consultees, but I would like to point out and draw your attention to condition 1 on this, which I've recommended, which includes a precondition survey on the U172 road. That's one of the access roads from the A713. This was the roads department have copied this over from another permission, and it's been pointed out that the main access would be the existing route used by traffic to the Windy Standard, not the U712. So on that basis, roads are satisfied that this condition is not necessary. So therefore I'm recommending approval of the application subject to the inclusion of all conditions, but not condition 1.
Thank you, Judith. There's a subtlety in your presentation where you talked about the quarry and borrow pit too. What's the difference? I'm being facetious because they're just quarries, really, aren't they? They're just called borrow pit to make it sound better. But anyway, that's fine, sorry. I take it you borrow stuff you get back. I don't want to put the stuff back. Do any members have any questions for Judith? Councillor Ted Thompson, Councillor McCaffrey.
Just on page 84, where we talk at 4.5, where we talk about amenity, what precisely is the standard dark sky directive?
Sorry, you're querying what the dark sky directive is?
Yes.
It's a standard one that we attach to planning permissions which fall within that area, and it just includes a copy of the dark sky park advice in terms of how you should reduce artificial light, etc., etc.
Supplementary, Ted.
So would that be part of the conditions that you're actually placing on the application?
It would be, there's a distinction. A condition is, as you would see set out in the recommendation, you've got 6 conditions, with condition 1 being struck. We also have a list of what are called directives. They're basically advice. They're not mandatory, they're not compulsory, but they're things that the planning authority would like to see done, or we're doing on behalf of other authorities such as Scottish Water, CPS, NH, where we're passing on advice rather than something which is mandatory and enforceable.
Oh, thank you for that information.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor McCaffrey, did you indicate you wanted to speak? Okay. Any other member have a question for Judith? In that case, we have one speaker on this, and it's Ian Hutchison, who is the agent. You have 5 minutes, Ian. I'll remind you when you have 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing really to add to the report and the presentation from the officer, but willing to answer any questions if members have them.
You've been extremely brief and grateful to you for that. Councillor Maitland and then Councillor Dryborough.
Could I ask if the applicant would be willing to comply with the Dark Skies Directive?
I see I don't think there's any overwhelming need to have big spotlights or anything like that. I think it's a practical building, and so long as the lighting itself is practical health and safety purposes, I don't think there's a significant issue.
I take it again, though, that will be a voluntary undertaking and not part of the condition, and that's absolutely fine. Councillor Dryborough?
I just wondering, Chair, I know it's on the routes and the entry routes to the site. There's a few issues with roads and that, and condition 1 has been taken out with regards to construction of that particular issue with the other part of the road. But I'm just wondering, is your company willing to maintain that road during the build period?
Yeah, I think where the confusion is coming from at the moment, if you go to the plan which is in your committee reports, there is, obviously it's an extensive area of forestry, as you've seen, and there are existing forest tracks throughout that area. Those tracks have already been used to construct Wally Standard 1, which is an operation on the farm that's been up there for nearly 20 years now. They're also used as a main forest extraction route. So basically that, I don't know if Jonathan has if you've got a plan that shows that, I'm basically really trying to explain it. But
yes, if that's all right.
If I put it up on the screen, it might help me understand it.
I'm happy with that. I think we need to be careful because, again, that there is a...
It's... Well, basically, there's the only access track up through is a good span road, which, if you look at your plan, it comes out round about number 10. If you look at the 713, sort of, which crosses diagonally across the bottom left-hand corner of the map in the report, you'll see number 10 next to Brockloch. There's a road which comes pretty much from the sort of forest span all the way up through. the reason for wanting to include a new all-method track was just to facilitate the delivery of the components for the switchgear. The big components, and they cannot deliver them on a certain gradient, so they needed to put in an extra bit of track.
I think just for background information, colleagues, the only reason the application's here is because of the length of the track, nothing to do with the road, it's the length of the track itself, so it's maybe well explained that. Councillor McKay.
I would have thought the size of building, hell, it's about as big as Buckingham Palace. What's the justification for 30 metres long, 12 metres wide and 6.5 metres high? It seems an awful size. And it doesn't seem as if, for the drawings we've seen, that the whole building's being used.
You can see on the top sort of there's a lid for switchgear, which takes the power from the farm, switches it over from into the sort of power supply, so there's no heating requirement in there. There's a lid for, as a result of sort of health and safety requirements and working requirements, you need toilets and office facilities and all the rest of it now. So it's a fairly standard building, it's now pretty much the norm on that kind of scale development.
Thanks, Councillor McKay. Councillor Cross, and did you indicate you want to speak, Councillor Mayland?
Just for clarification on condition 1, I think my understanding of it is, just to make sure that I'm correct, is that on any public road on the run up to the site, I take it that there'll be a camera survey done on that, and any defects will be picked up on. So if there's any detriment to the road thereafter, that'll be picked up, and the developer will take care of any defects.
Well, that's why I say we need to be careful. We need to identify the developer actually caused it, and it's quite a busy road. It's used with traffic for us to extract, etc. And I think what happens normally is that we continually monitor the condition of the road, and if it becomes obvious that the developer has caused an issue, then we would take it up with the developer directly. But I don't think it's something that we can write into a condition. It's quite clear that we've been asked to remove condition 1 as it stands because it's not appropriate for this permission. If there are no other questions, you were in session. Members, Councillor Dryburn and Councillor...
Just go on the recommendations.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I would certainly agree with that, so I'll certainly support it, but I'm not entirely convinced that, and particularly in the back of what Ian has just, has just said, I'm not entirely convinced that, we should be striking out the proposed condition 1. I mean, we've had this elsewhere in Dumfries and Galloway, where the council, as roads authority, has ultimately had to put its hand in its pocket, and deal with damage, to sort of public highways, etc. And I would like us to reconsider, approve it, no problems, but I'd like us to reconsider, condition 1 as to whether or not, in fact, we should perhaps be retaining that, Chairman.
Thanks for that, Councillor. I think what the planning officer said was that road is identified in the document, and that's not the road that's going to be used. I think that's what Judith was saying. It's a completely different road that's being used for the equipment to come to site. But Judith, you can expand on that, please.
Yes, my understanding is that the Roads Department made a mistake. They just put the same condition on. When now I've spoken to the agent, they've confirmed that they're intending to use their own private tracks for the access, and there will be no public roads used. There is no harm in leaving it on in case they decide to use that road, I suppose, but given the information we've been given, it's not necessary.
Well, there's some public road bound to be used if they're taking material from A to B.
A713.
The A713, right.
Can I come back, sir? Steve, I mean, Judith's saying my understanding. Well, that to me implies a caveat. I would like to see it retained as a catch-all. Being quite honest about it, because we've had this problem elsewhere. And I'm thinking particularly in areas to the north of the A75 in Withdrawn, where there's been a heck of a lot of problems experienced. Let me make it clear, Chairman, I am not against, in any way, shape or form the proposals. All I'm saying is that I personally would err on the side of caution, perhaps, by keeping that condition in, as I say, akin to something in the nature of a catch-all.
I'm happy, members are happy. The only thing is you need to change the document to read A713 because it doesn't say that at the present moment in time. So members comfortable with leaving that particular section in? Okay. In that case, clerk, please.
The committee has determined to approve the application subject to the amendment of condition 1 as set out in the report to refer to the road A713, not the road U172.
Members happy? Thank you. Okay, we'll move to item 11, which is change of use of part of car park for siting of 6 porta cabins at Dumfries Ice Ball, King Street, Dumfries. Case Officer Andrew Robinson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for temporary planning permission for a period of 6 months to change the use of part of the car park area in Dumfries Ice Bowl to site 6 porta cabins, and the proposal is required to provide extra facilities or accommodation as a result of World Championship events that are to be held over the winter period. So this is the site for anybody who's unfamiliar with the area. This is the Ice Bowl situated east of Palmerston Park on the northern side of Treagle Street, close to Dumfries Town Centre. The porta cabins would be sited along the frontage of the building, which is indicated by the red line shown on this site plan. And in terms of how they would be laid out, there would be 4 larger porta cabins for changing facilities and 2 smaller ones for a shower and a toilet block. This is an elevation of the larger porta cabin. It's just a standard appearance with grey cladding, and the smaller porta cabins is very similar in appearance as well. The next 2 slides are photographs of the site, so this is looking towards where the porta cabins would be sited, which is along the frontage there, and would result in the removal of the trees along the front there, and a net reduction in 4 car parking spaces. And this is taken from a slightly different angle. We're looking towards the building. And the photograph on the right just showing the surrounding locality and its sort of proximity away from neighbouring properties. So in summary, on this application, officers consider that the porta cabins are acceptable for a temporary period to assist with the World Championship events at the Ice Bowl, and it's recommended that a 6-month temporary permission is approved, subject to the attached condition in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Members have any questions for Planning Officer? No, there are no representatives. Councillor Maitland.
I suppose I am a little sad that some trees of that size, which are shading and looking after and softening the building, are to be sacrificed for the sake of six months. Does that absolutely have to happen?
We mentioned that in the report, and as part of the condition, we've indicated a scheme of tree replanting shall be carried out within 2 months of the date of the expiry of the permission. So actually, 1 month before the expiry of the 6 months, the council will be required to submit details of how they would replant a scheme of replanting, which should be for the approval of the planning authority. And I'm sure there was something mentioned in it's in paragraph 4.6 on visual impact. There's a bit more information about that.
I think the subtlety at Jane's point, Andrew, will be that you will remove a mature tree and stick in a tiny one. I think that will be Jane's point, unless we require the council to replant a mature tree, which would be fairly expensive exercise, but it would be a better solution than a tiny tree that's going to have 10 or 20 years to grow. I think that's the point Jane was making. I don't know if members want to say or do anything about that. Councillor Geddes.
On the same theme then, Chairman, what are the existing trees that will be taken away? What type of trees are they?
Where? Yeah. They're clearly well established. I don't know what kind they are, but they're clearly well established. And
the thrust of my question, sir, was actually, I'm no arboriculturalist, but I think, you know, I might take a different attitude if they were the likes of sycamore than Scots pine or stuff like that. I would like to say, I must confess that, you know, if I had my way, the whole of Scotland that was the use for, you know, food would be here, would be Caperton, Scots pine and Rowlands and birch. So, you know, as I say, I would be looking, if we have to take the trees away, and I think Councillor Maitland's point is well made, I would like to see them replaced with something which I at least would regard as being traditionally Scottish trees, you know, in, sort of, in this part of the country.
David and then Stephen Thompson.
And when I actually looked at this one as well, that was the thing that bothered me. Acting corporately, we have gone for approval, but yes, these are pretty substantial trees. I'm no arboriculturist myself, but I would be surprised if you could remove these trees, store them and replant them. That's just not going to happen. But you could have condition 1 amended to require standards. You know, so you're not talking about little whips going in there, that you are talking about something of a reasonable size as a replacement.
Okay, I think Councillor Thompson was just telling me Councillor Dick was wanting in, is that right? Thank you.
I don't know whether this sounds a silly question, but could we not have put the porticabins in front of the trees without having to cut them down?
Stephen, I think that's a rhetorical question, but Andrew will respond after Stephen and Alistair have made their points.
Yeah, it's on a tree theme as well. Are we confident that we're allowed to actually fell the trees? I know there's been other issues where we've felled trees where it might not have actually been appropriate, but I presume that would be checked beforehand.
Yes, they're not covered by a tree preservation order or situated within conservation areas, so they don't require any formal or felling licence to fell them.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, there might not be covered, with the greatest of respect, you know, there might not be covered by a tree preservation order, but I mean, they're still living, you know, living organisms, and as far as I'm concerned, you know, I do share the, you know, Councillor Maitland's expression of regret. However, if we have to do it, let's do it and replace them, as Mr. Sutty has said, with standards. But I would go further than that and say, and again, I'll look to wiser heads than mine, yourself and ours, sir, about, you know, what type of standards we'd be looking for. As I've already said, you know, I have a particular, you know, fondness for Scots pine, birch and rowan and trees of that ilk. Could we maybe even take advice as to, you know, stipulate just exactly what type of standards are going to be?
I'd be happy with that if that's an enforceable condition. Okay, members, any other observations? In that case, we're about to make a decision. There is one thing that I'd like to, it's an observation I should say, and I shouldn't ask. I wouldn't like to see a recurring theme of porta-cabins if we have some need for facilities to accommodate or facilitate major events in Dumfries. We might be saying to the management of the Ice Bowl or whichever department of the council have submitted this application that we'd be looking for a more permanent solution, and wouldn't want to see on a frequent basis applications like this. But anyway, Councillor McKee and then Councillor Maitland.
Well, just on the basis of that, Chair, we've been doing it for a number of years now, and it's maybe something that we maybe should bring forward to the council to develop changing facilities in that area for big groups of people. Because last year there was about over 1,000 skaters in the Ice Bowl last year, and this year, as has been said, you've got two international ice hockey tournaments, international skating, and these sorts of things are what's going on now in the area. And what you're saying is right, maybe we should be looking at accommodation for changing facilities and whatnot.
It's certainly part of the economic development plan, but however, it's nothing that we can progress through this committee. We would just ask David to make the appropriate representation or send the appropriate message from this committee that we expect better in the long term if there's going to be a regular occurrence. Councillor May.
Right, well, I'm going to propose we refuse it. Chairman. On the basis of the loss of 8 trees, I don't think the case has been made that they absolutely have to be there. I don't think the case has been made to me that it has to be there. I have to accept the applications in front here, and it means that we lose 8 trees, which are reasonably well grown, and I actually disagree that there is no loss. And I would suggest that we lose 8 trees, and it would reduce the amenity of the area. So I propose to refuse it.
Thanks for that. So sorry, Councillor Geddes.
I was just going to move as an amendment, sir, that we grant the consent on the basis detailed, subject to the provisos that the trees, regrettably, which will be lost as a consequence, will be replaced by appropriate standards, standards appropriate to tree types in this part of the world.
And do you want to include some mention of maturity? Or
I'm saying standards, sir. I mean, I think that does that not cover it, Chairman?
Councillor Dryburgh, Councillor McKee, you second that, okay. That the consensus of the committee? Thanks for that, okay. Oh, of course, sorry, Councillor Maitland. Just repeat your motion, please.
Well, I hope the clerk basically got it. Right, well, I'll find out whether I got a seconder or not.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Maitland?
In which case, then, Chairman, would you be so kind as to record my dissent?
Dissent, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, okay. We come to item 12. Pardon? Oh, sorry, I apologize.
The committee has determined to approve the application subject to conditions under amendment of condition 1 as set out in the report to require appropriate standard trees to replace plant those which will be lost.
Apologies for that, Paula. Thank you. We now have item 12, which is Case Officer Lindsay Brown. But before I ask Lindsay to present the case, Councillor Dick Vice Chairman and I received an electronic message late last night from Alan Carruthers. It came at 21:51, and I've shared that with with David and Janice. Dear Council, I invite yourselves to ask for deferral of the item number 12 on your agenda of the Planning Applications Committee 23rd October for a month to give us the chance to address some of the inaccuracies contained within the report of the Council. I'm asking this because there may be some confusion of the sequence of events leading up to this committee report, and because my agent has been on holiday and haven't had the chance to address my concerns first hand. As you all have read, the Area Committee previously made positive soundings toward this application, so I hope you find you're able to defer. Now, whether or not we defer is absolutely up to members, but the worry I would have is that it talks about inaccuracies rather than an opportunity to address the issues that have been raised legitimately by the case officer. Now, if we choose to defer for a month, it may be that and that is a decision for you members, no me, we absolutely send a message that there has to be a solution in a month, because we can't have this being used as a vehicle to delay the process until somehow it just happens by default. So I'm in your hands, members. There is a request for a deferral. Does any member have a view on that? Councillor Geddes and then Councillor Ted Thompson.
Can I have some procedural guidance, Chairman? Because, and where we've agreed, deferrals, etc., by and large, it's tended to be the conclusions that were of the case officer's presentation and parties speaking. I think, if my understanding is correct, in this particular instance, sir, we're really being asked for a deferral before we start the process at all. Is that the case, Chairman?
That's how I'd interpret it, because I don't know then how you'd introduce the request for deferral, because the applicant's not here nor his agent. But if members want to see the presentation, because Lindsay is here, it wouldn't be a difficulty to do that. I just worry about, as you say, procedural, where we go. We got it before the commencement of meeting today. David and Janice were provided with copies before the meeting commenced today.
Can I suggest on that basis then, sir, that perhaps exceptionally we accede to the request and we don't ask Lindsay, to sort of get involved in making a presentation. Or regrettably, she's had a wasted journey as a consequence. But that way, if we do it that way, I would reinforce entirely, Chairman, your comments. I think the message has got to be, we got home clearly and unequivocally to the applicant or applicants that this will be determined. You're getting your deferral on the basis that you've asked, but this application will be determined one way or another at the next meeting of this committee. And I support you on that.
Absolutely concur with that. I know David wants to speak, but Councillor Dryborough has something to add.
So there's a long history with this application. It's been on in the SDL area committee several times in the past. And the applicant hasn't helped himself in all those years that the application has actually been there. And he's been given a lot of good advice by officers of the planning committee. I've got a different spin on this. I think we need to determine this so that planning can go ahead with the output of this committee from that particular side. So there's been a lot of to and fro between the planning officers and the applicant itself. And to be honest, Chair, I'm a bit concerned that regardless what conditions or anything like that we would put on an application if we were to consent to it, I don't think we would stick to it.
Thanks for your observations, Councillor Dryborough. If you're proposing that we consider the application, that's fine. I'll allow Councillor Maitland and Councillor Thompson, the LS members, what, if any, proposals are being brought forward. So it's Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Chairman. I was simply going to make the point that this went in on the 16th of July and the report was published on the web on the 10th of October. So I feel there is no reason not to get on with it now.
Okay, Councillor Ted Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. On reading the papers, I felt there was actually some ambiguity between some of the statements that are actually made in this application. Personally, I would have liked to have heard the officer's submission, before actually bringing them up. But I do think there are some points around 4.8, 4.17 and 4.16 where the statements don't really appear to concur. So on that basis, I would be inclined to support the view that the application was deferred.
Councillor Dick.
Yeah, I obviously got the email at the same time as yourself, Chair, last night. But what first occurred to me, which I think is what Councillor Maitland has articulated, this came out in July. Surely the applicants have had the papers, or the report long before it. Why were we getting a request in last night? I'm in two minds about deferral on that basis, but I think there's probably sufficient doubt being expressed about parts of the report that perhaps we give it a deferral for a month, and I would support Councillor Geddes in that.
Thank you. There is obviously some difference of view among members, and we have, and I know it's a given, we have all read the papers, we all know the concerns that the planning officer has, and they're obviously legitimate concerns. If a month resolves the matter, then I think it's worthy of an attempt, but I'm happy to go to a vote. I think that's the fairest way. We should have a vote, a motion and an amendment, have a vote, and then the majority members will decide what we should do. But I would say, though, that and I concur with the view everybody that if a deferral is the ultimate decision, it is for a month, and irrespective of what happens, it lands on this table and we determine it. But anyway, we have a motion and an amendment. If we just rehearse them again, please. Oh, Councillor Dryborough wants to speak.
So I never made a motion. What I said was I think we should, determine this today. I never said I was going as a motion. On the basis that if it comes back to the next committee, it's going to be concluded, then I'm happy with that. But this won't come on any longer because it's been there for years, and officers have spent enough, as far as I'm concerned, officers have spent enough time on this application, and the applicant has had his own actions to do, and he's not done them.
I think that's the sympathy we all have. Apart from anything else, we have no meeting standards set for determining applications when we have applications like this. So It goes without saying that all members want to see them concluded at an early stage unless there are extenuating circumstances, and I wouldn't want to compromise the position of staff because we've enough work to conduct without going round and round and round the same houses to try and resolve one particular matter. However, Councillor Maitland still has a view that we should determine it today. So is that the case, Councillor Maitland, that you still believe we should determine it today?
Well, it is, Chairman, yes. I do think we should determine it today. I would be very pleased to hear what the precise reasons are given if somebody wants to defer it, because I think it's quite important we have very precise reasons for deferral. So if somebody could articulate the precise reason for deferral, that would be helpful.
Well, I think I said at the outset that the reasons are particularly vague and give me concern anyway. The applicant or the writer, who is Jai Carruthers, representing Carruthers Brothers, to address some of the inaccuracies contained within the report of the council. Now that could be something as simple as the planning officer says we've tried to resolve it for a year and he thinks it was only 6 months. That's an inaccuracy that you want to address. But it would make no difference to the planning application, no difference to the process. What the difficulty I have is that I'm always, if I can, amenable to someone saying, if there's an opportunity to resolve it, I'd like that opportunity. And this is now a clear message of the opportunity to resolve it, if we allow it, as a 4-week period, and then there is absolutely no comeback after that particular date without a determination being made. If you want to come back, that's fine, and then Councillor Geddes wants to speak after that.
Thank you, Chairman. I think on the basis of what you have said, I will suggest that we determine it today. At least we hear it today. We hear it today. We take the process forward. Thank you.
Before the decision is made, would it help if this was copied and members got a look at it? Or are you quite happy to have the text read out again? Pardon? Oh, did you? All right, okay. Councillor Geddes, I thought it was only Councillor Dick.
I can't recollect having seen it, so I'll check when I go back along to the SNP room. But, my understanding is that, when you read it out, you made reference to the fact that, his agent wasn't able to be present. I think that's mentioned. Please, if you would, that'd be grateful, Chairman.
I am writing to yourselves to ask for deferral of item number 12 of your agenda, the Planning Applications Committee, on 23rd October for a month, to give us the chance to address some of the inaccuracies contained within the report of the Council. I am asking for this because there may be some confusion over the sequence of events in the run-up to this committee report, and because my agent has been on holiday, I haven't had the chance to address my concerns first-hand. That's what he says. As you have read, the Area Committee previously made positive findings for this application, so I hope you find you are able to defer. Alistair?
In fact, to say he's got, there are genuine reasons, but more importantly, his agent, he feels there are genuine reasons, there are areas which need clarification. At the end of the day, more importantly, he wishes to discuss these with his agent. His agent is not available. His agent presumably is on holiday. At the end of the day, this is all about quality of decision, and it's all about safeness of decision. And I would want to participate in a decision today, as it were, which would leave us open to saying, well, you took that decision despite a request, despite claims, for the applicant to have the opportunity of clarifying various situations and dealing with what he feels are various inaccuracies. That's the reason why I'm suggesting 1 month only, and it's determined next time round, one way or another.
Yeah, did you get your opportunity to speak, Councillor Thompson, Ted, earlier? If you have, it's Ian.
No, I have nothing further to say.
Councillor Dick, thank you. Ian? Did you want back in?
No, I just wanted...
All right, okay. Okay, so we have Jane looking to...
There is no agent. There is no agent, and it's a non-speaking item. Sorry, I was referring to the chair, but really being dialectical. There is no agent. It's a non-speaking item. So this deferral, because the agent's on holiday, it's just not correct, and we're satisfied there are no material inaccuracies in the report, but we're in your hands.
The agent might not necessarily be here and to speak to us, but he will maybe have an agent that's representing him when he meets a case officer. I don't know, or he may have engaged one.
But the application form shows there is no agent. the applicant is Carruthers Brothers with no agent. Is that right, Linda?
I also spoke with the applicant on Friday of last week following publication of the report, and at no time have they raised that there was any inaccuracies in the report.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, he has done now, sir, and he's done it, you know, and it's unfortunate, you know, that he is not, you know, that these issues were not raised, you know, when he spoke to the case officer on last Friday. But, you know, he has, in fact, done so now. He's raised, you know, what he deems to be legitimate concerns. You know, as I say, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and take that attitude. It's not the first time that I've advocated, you know, and did it comparatively recently, you know, in another forum, and you're well aware, you know, we're talking about license practice, for instance, in licensing panels, where, you know, people don't always, you know, sometimes they don't appear without giving us any indication that they're not coming, you know, and we've always taken the attitude that, you know, look, in the interest of sound decision making and reasonableness, you know, give one deferral or one adjournment. And I would take the, you know, the analogous approach here, sir, particularly on the back of the fact that, you know, the applicant, you know, has approached us, but it's determined one way or another next meeting.
I take it, Lindsay, you're not going to hold it for a month or anything. So we now have a position where Jane has a proposal to determine it, Alistair has a proposal to defer. I'll allow Stephen to speak, then we'll stop and see if we have seconders for any of these proposals, and we'll move on. Stephen, you're the last man in this.
I was going to second Jane. Jane.
Ted.
That's what Stephen said there.
You seconded Alistair. So we now have a motion and an amendment.
She doesn't want to actually
Jane?
determine it today necessarily.
Can I make myself completely clear, Chairman, that my proposal is to hear it, What we decide throughout the process might be different, but it's to hear it.
Well, in that case, we'll have a vote whether to hear it or whether to defer it, but the problem is, if we hear it and you then feel you like to defer it, do we still have the capacity to do that, or are we? Yes. Fine, okay. So the first vote is whether or no we hear the officer's presentation or whether we simply defer for a month, bearing in mind that in a month's time this will be here irrespective of whatever discussion takes place in whatever forum. Stephen.
Just a point of clarification, when we hear it, we're effectively, if we decide, should we so decide to hear it, we're effectively treating it as it's been put in front of us as part of the planning applications committee papers. Is that correct?
Not only that, you're in session, which means no other members can participate, which is a technicality that might cause us difficulty because there are a lot of members that would be willing and able to contribute that are not here today. So there is, however, having said that, the members that are here entitled to decide. It's as simple as that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if we hear it, all of the members that are present can then determine it.
Okay, so the motion proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Stephen Thompson, is to proceed with consideration of this item. The amendment proposed by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Ted Thompson, is to grant the applicant's request for 1 month deferral. Chair.
Amendment.
Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake's not here. Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes. Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor McCottrey's not here. Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
McComb not here. Councillor Stephen Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Ted Thompson.
Amendment.
4 and 5.
4 and 5, so that 5 is...
The 4 votes for the motion, 5 votes for the amendment. The committee is determined to grant the applicant's request for a 1 month deferral.
And can we be absolutely sure that when staff communicate this decision, that the applicant is fully aware that there will be no additional extension? It will be heard 1 month from today. and determined 1 month from today. I have no other business. Thank you very much for your indulgence and your attendance. We'll see you in a month's time.